Okay.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Set. Oh, hello and
Hi.
welcome.
I don't want to mess you up, but I don't know why you can't hear me.
Right. I'm going to assume that is starting. Welcome, everyone. I am doing the magical work of figuring out how things work on the live stream. And once again,
no, I'm not dressed.
Totally beyond me. But that's okay because Yapashira is here and that is exciting. And she's going to figure out her audio. And yeah. And if not, we'll continue discussing and you can chat and share things via chat. I'll be happy to read them out. What we're actually going to start with is I'm going to share the screen. For this week, the Vaad work is moving a little bit further down into the body. It's the 4th week of counting the Omer, and this is the week of netzach, where it's the Kabbalists understand this divine attribute alive in us in the right hip, which means that it's something that can be put into action. Okay, loving kindness. There's ways to use it. Vura, certainly ways to be strong, have discipline and boundaries.
Could you actually go?
And
I'm the only one hooked up, and she needs me to be hooked up.
This week again,
me up to here, please?
We move into this place of netzach.
I know, I'm telling you,
which is usually interpreted as
I don't know why she can't hear me and I can't hear her.
Okay. Grit and
I'm on a phone.
This year especially, I have been thinking of it very strongly as one second. Very strongly as resilience.
And she's still not here?
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
With that, I'm gonna share my screen. I have a 1-minute video. So Yapashira, you are good to go. Oh, we have one more coming in.
Okay, so can you show me how do I go in?
Where did you get the link?
In my
I'll make sure that she's in.
I'm switching to the computer.
You're gonna take your time, Yapashira. Don't worry at all. Again, This is the week of netzach, of perserverance. We're just gonna keep trying. You'll figure it out. We won't figure it out. You showed up. This is absolutely the work of this. There's really, it kind of just goes to show there's no, hi Analia. There's, it just goes to show there's not really one way to do it.
Link is
and there's
in your email.
actually no way
Go
to
to
get
your
it
email.
wrong. Every action that we take towards one of these midot, towards one of these values, is an opportunity for soul development. And sometimes when it goes kind of wrong or askew, it's just another opportunity to sort of take a deep breath and start again. Which is why this is what we are doing. I'm trying out an exciting new thing. I'm going to share a 1-minute breathing exercise. You'll see I'll start the video and it literally is just a guide for 1 minute to breathe in and breathe out. You'll be able to follow along on the Facebook Live.
And then it's not working.
Doing this exercise was one of the first times where it helped me realize how long a minute is.
And I got this.
How many times my attention sort of veers in 1 minute, and then I have an opportunity to bring it back again and again and again. So entry-level breathing exercise, I guarantee I will be practicing along with you. The practice of soul development is never the perfection of it, but again, just practice. And here we go. Okay. All right.
And why can't I freaking hear anything?
Hold on 1 second. And here we go.
Look at your email.
And as you can see, you inhale and exhale.
She needs to add you. Look at the email.
Yeah.
Inhale
Thank you so
and exhale.
Join from PC, Mac, Linux. Click here to join, which is what I
much.
clicked.
Which is why.
Okay. That's it. I'm going to unmute everyone. And give congratulations to Eden for.
Oh, hey, how's it going? Can you hear us?
Eden, you are more than welcome to stay if you would like.
I'm just troubleshooting, but thank you very much.
You're very sweet. Okay. Welcome back. I know Yafshir will come back as soon as she is able to, which is also delightful. And I'm just going to pull back up my notes for us. Okay. It is rare that I will take specific time to take a full minute and inhale and exhale. Most of the time I'm happy with like a quick inhale and exhale here and there. Here you go, Sharon, I'm going to take you off mute. For some reason, I can't unmute you. There we go. We'll see. If not, yeah, sure, you can always just
Unmuted me. Can you hear?
see. This is perseverance. This is grit. This is.
I thought because we're a netzach, it would just be la netzach.
Do the translation of that for our non-Hebrew speakers.
I just thought it would be forever like this.
Yes, yes, maybe, and maybe it would. Maybe that would be the lesson for sure. So as I was saying, like netzach to me is, first of all, it's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite actions because I love the art of muscling through, of being able to work really hard, of have a lot of effort, and to really be able to see growth and progress. And there are times where it's definitely out of balance, or it's actually like I'm not persevering in a way that's in service to my own growth. So first, I would just love to hear, we're going to do things a little bit differently than we have. We're just going to take advantage of the people who are in the room and share a good discussion. So when I use the word netzach, again, I definitely think of it as perseverance. I think of it as grit. I am starting to think of it as resilience and rededication again and again and again and again. And I'm wondering what netzach means for you.
I think that your translation is so much more productive than just my understanding as forever, la netzach, to the end of time, till eternity.
Right.
And I feel like it's more dynamic when you say perseverance, and it's more active. It's much less passive, and it's productive. And I like to now try to think of it as perseverance, the long haul, but really giving something to get there.
Yeah, it's again, like I just want something to do, and I like it that there's something that might keep my attention for more than a moment. But even so, I am not sure what that 1 minute, if ever, we'll do the 1 minute exercise again and towards the end of our time together. And as a practice, just because, again, like nobody has to get it right on the first time. But I notice how many times my mind or my thinking is distracted, how hard it is actually to just focus on my breathing for literally 1 minute for 60 seconds. It's like maybe 5 to 10 breaths. Emily, what about you? What does netzach mean for you these days?
You know, it's funny because I hadn't actually thought about what it meant for me until you asked it. That's, I guess, my truth telling coming out. I think I usually think of it as like the long haul of being in something for good or for bad, but like having it sort of on a longer term scale, and then having to sort of adjust within that, adjust myself, adjust my behavior, adjust my expectations, to make staying within that longer sphere and longer span more manageable or productive, maybe.
Sure, if somebody has some music playing. Oh, I know what that is. I have a it's okay. I was like, that was so delightful. One of the YouTube videos, like it went to the next one and was playing music. I was like, I have unending power here. Music will suddenly just show up when we need it to underscore your phenomenal thinking. What else was there? Was there anything else that you wanted to add? Okay, cool. Awesome. So one of the things that I just want to go back to, it feels super important to me to renew this idea every week and continue to reinforce it bit by bit until it's just understandable. I love thinking about things on a soul level all the time. I do not constantly and always forever attend to it. And it is only when I've taken out like a little bit of a chunk of time to think about it that I start to say, okay, what does this mean? And what does this mean to me? So it's totally, I so get it when you say like, oh, I hadn't really thought about it until you ask. That's what this kind of thing is for, to have a carved out amount of time to dive a little bit deeper into something so that we can then put it into action and really just see what happens. Okay, so thinking about some of the ways that we're all thinking about netzach, again, like whether it's to persevere, to, that it is this foreverness, that there is, I'm gonna also like translate that for myself, that there is like infinite possibility. We have an infinite amount of creativity, to just sort of like let it go on for forever and to play with it. It's a really good thing that we just came out of Vaad that has like some boundaries. So hopefully, ideally, we'll know like when is the appropriate time to stop. We don't have to keep working on something forever and ever and ever and ever, just sort of grinding our gears. All right. But I do want to think about what are the things that allow you to be in somewhere for the long haul. What allows you to persevere, what is it, and we can think about it in terms of things that are internal and things that are external. So for this next little bit, I'm going to ask you to just have something to write on and write with. Okay. And while you're taking that, while you're just getting a moment to find that, I'll just talk a little bit more about that. Again, once we start adding in layers and layers and layers of these midot, of these soul traits, to me, it's one of the only times in my life that I really like to create some orderly thinking. For me, that orderly thinking allows for more creative use of things. So because I want these tools to be long lasting. I want them to be interesting and I want to mess around with them for a long time on a soul level so that I can develop myself as a human being. The yoga parallel are those poses that I make you all do that are like, I could never do that. And then to sort of break them down action by action, so that over time you understand it's just logistics, putting it together. It's the logistics of understanding the alignment. It's the logistics of understanding the strength necessary. And it's the logistics of sort of softening your own limitations and being like, all right, I'm going to go with it. So with that, you have your piece of paper, just something to, like I said, something to write with. And I'm just gonna ask you to, let's see, I'm trying to think like how to visualize this. I'm gonna let you visualize it however you want. There's gonna be two categories, okay, of thinking about perseverance. One of them is thinking about internal ways that motivate us to keep going, to keep on trucking, and because there are those like internal drives and external drives. All right. So we might have, if we were, like my friend Julie is teaching me how to make spreadsheets. If we were going to be making a spreadsheet, there would be two columns, an internal side and an external side. And then just as a place to start, we're just going to start, like name 6 internal motivations or 6 external motivations. On mine, the left side is the internal, the right side is the external, okay? And again, I have you on mute so you can just take a moment to think through, but as quick as you can, just give 6 different things that might work for you. So from like on some of the things on mine, an external thing that motivates me to keep going is measured progress. Things that like I can see outside of me. It could be the way a pose looks from the outside. The balance of that internally is my frustration, which is kind of a flip side thing for me. My frustration as a motivator. It's not that I seek out frustration, just over time, frustration has become a clue, like, oh, I am almost there. I'm almost there getting to what really motivates me. And underneath that is really just like a love of understanding. And so my internal motivation then is love of understanding. Okay, we'll just take another moment. If you're doing this on Facebook Live with us, you'll hear me be a little bit quiet while I think for a moment. Ooh, good one. I'm gonna save that one for when we discuss it, okay? Okay. I'm going to take you all off mute, and maybe you have 6 for each side and maybe you don't. That's totally okay. I just want to share, I noticed that some of my internal and external motivations or things that like sort of nourish me and keep me going are very, very similar. And I'm wondering if there are things on either of your lists that you would be willing to share.
Sure.
Okay.
For me, I wrote down, I put it on external, but I think it might be an internal, keeping the chain.
Okay.
So, for example, exercising 5 days in a row or something of that nature creates a lot of motivation for me actually to keep going, because I really just want to like keep, especially if I can track it, I want to keep the, I just want to keep the chain alive. Which I think actually goes well with Becca's point of like measuring, having some sort of external measure.
Yeah, I like that phrase a lot, keeping the chain alive.
Yeah.
It speaks to, I don't know, it has like more of a heart quality to me than like
Mhm.
I'm tracking things and I'm keeping things orderly, but like I'm keeping this chain alive. I'm remembering like every 12 and 13-year-old that I've ever worked with, and they're all like, I'm sorry, but
We
I gotta,
lost
like,
you,
keep my
Becca. You
Snapchat
stopped.
chain. I can't remember
You
what it's
froze.
called when you like keep your Snapchat chain alive.
But it's not la netzach.
It is not.
It's just going to be, we're going to persevere through it.
Yeah.
We lost you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sometimes my internet goes a little bit in and out. Yeah, no, it's like, it's just going to help get you through it. Again, this is not, this midah, this soul work, I believe it, if I was going to pair this midah with a text that is like a good pairing, like a good wine, it would be lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, that we are absolutely not required to finish this work, basically because it's not possible, but we're also not allowed to just sort of like sit back and do nothing. And so we like pull these things out of like, what is it that helps keep me going? Yashir, what's one of yours?
I have two internal things. Desire to be successful and to improve my health. Like,
Right.
I want to know that I can say I did it and that I was successful, and I want to be healthy.
Okay, there's like a couple of things in there. I wrote down one, and immediately after I wrote down one, I was like, I can't say that. That sounds horrible. What kind of soul development is that? That I want people that it, like, I thought about it from an external perspective. Like, I want people to notice, or I want to be successful in something, and I want people to say like, congratulations, or I see this.
Well,
So
that's interesting, because my external ones were verbal encouragement and example to my kids.
Okay, so for those two, here's how I sort of positive, I appreciative inquiry, those kinds of like, I just turned those into a positive. That to me speaks to a desire for connection. That one of the things that keeps me going is a community. I definitely will work out harder, better, and more for my own physical health benefit if I am with someone or if I'm in a public place. It's been a whole other game figuring out how to keep up my health while while self-quarantined. It's because I don't have that external motivation.
Right.
And again, while on a very surface level, I might say like, yes, I like looking really strong. I want that external motivation. I'm going to say like, no, I want to be in connection with my community. That also feeds it. I also want to go back to one thing that you said, which is, I believe like there's ambition in netzach. It's a vision of what's possible and a willingness, like literally a will to go get it and to
Strive.
to strive to do something. May not get it. It is, to me, it's easiest to be thinking of those things in a physical sense. And that ambition is something that it's taken me a long time to be able to say, like, I want that, and I'm gonna go get it.
Go get it.
That you put that here. I have like on the side, I almost didn't write them down, but I have a couple of that are just like the basics. If I'm gonna even think about keeping myself going, I need to eat well, drink enough water, and get enough rest. And I've learned the hard way about that. And the hard thing is, like, this midah is so ingrained in me. I can fake enough stamina for quite some time and maybe don't recognize the times that I've like reached my limit and I'm unable to go on because I'll just keep going. But really paying attention to just the very, 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 very basics. It feels so simple. I will breathe, I will take deep breaths, I will eat well, I will drink water, and I will get rest to the best, to as skillfully as I can.
I love that.
What does that mean for you? Is that something that feels like it resonates, or it feels challenging and you want that, you have some ambition for it? Where are you with all of that?
I'll say for myself that I have been spending a lot of time in the past year looking to understand what it means to rest and what it means for me to restore and what it means to renew. And I find it very difficult because I think I hear a lot of what you're saying, Becca. Very, very, very much resonates with me of like keeping, like I can fake the stamina. I really like that line. And finding ways, actually one of the other things I wrote down was actually creating deadlines. I think breaking up the netzach into smaller chunks and maybe taking a little bit of a rest between or near them can be helpful, and is something I would say that I'm not so great at practicing yet, but I'm working on and being attentive to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just want to say this is absolutely one of the reasons why I love doing this in a group setting. I have a love-hate relationship with deadlines, and I recognize how motivating they are in keeping me going and all of that other stuff. But I also love keeping every possibility open as long as possible, and would do so unless there was a deadline. And I have never thought about deadlines in relationship to netzach until you just said that. So thank you so much. I definitely needed that. Because again, like the practice of netzach isn't just how can I push forward more? How can I push forward more? It's what are the qualities that actually feed into this again and again and again, so that it's with nuance. It's not just this like surface level, I'm going to keep going until I drop understanding. There's a maturity level to it. There's a gravitas. It's more embodied rather than just trying to fake our way through it and do our best. Are there any, now I want to know, what else is on your list, both of you all? What else you got?
Yeah, I said everything.
Everything. Fantastic. Fantastic. Those are all good for me too. The only other one that I would say is sometimes, again, it's like, this is a midah that I really will go to the extremes on to learn. And then it occurs to me that that's just my way of learning habitually anyway. And so how can I recognize and use that skill set for the good instead of using my powers for evil or for my own mismanagement? All right. And that is boundary pushing. Okay. I love that feeling of really pushing up against the edge of something and seeing if there's a little bit more. It could be, it is absolutely with my students, like, can I be in a trusting, I know Yepshir's laughing. She's like, oh no, we have yoga scheduled on Wednesday. What's going to happen? It's going to be great. It's a good week. It's netzach. Okay. And, do we, can I build a trusting enough relationship that my students might say, like, when I say to them, there's more for you, to then just try a little bit more. And then also trusting their boundaries and recognizing that, like, nobody has to do everything that I say. For myself, it would be, it just feels good to really find the edge. And I recognize with my own capacity to push that sometimes I'm going to go a little bit too far. And that's actually where I find, like, that's enough. But I'll keep trying again and again and again and again and again. All right. So with these lists, what I'm going to put into the chat is a couple of the, all of the other midot that we've done. This is the 5th week that I'm doing this. And even if you haven't been a part of every time that we've had together, I believe we can all have an understanding of them. So one moment. Okay, so the very first one that we did was anava and humility, which comes with its idea of taking up the right amount of space. Okay, and this relates to netzach in terms of it doesn't go on forever. We can let things, ideas, projects, our work day last a right amount of space. And sometimes we have to honor our own limitations. And I can't believe I just said that out loud because I hate limitations more than anything. And I will continue to learn from them with the right amount of space for them. All right, the next one, the first week after Passover, we explored chesed, loving kindness. This idea of, like, once you're in your space, to just soften and see what's there, allowing what comes your way to be greeted with a sense of devotion. And it can be matched with netzach in terms of dedication, that it's not just we're going to mindlessly do something, we're going to do it with dedication that's fueled by devotion. The next week was gvura, which literally is translated as strength, but also has this connotation of discipline, of limits, and alignment. Okay, that there are ways of showing up in service of your own growth, and that also, I believe, has a role in netzach, where you get a chance to gather up some strength and try it out and see how that works. Being mindful about it, understanding, like, okay, I haven't slept more than 4 hours. Maybe X, Y, or Z is not the greatest choice for me. So I'll do what I can do, and understanding my own limitations. The last one that we did last week was Tiferet, this idea of balance between chesed and gvura. It's very heart-centered, but again, it has its, it plays with a little, like the right amount of chesed and the right amount of gvura. And again, it can also have its part with netzach, that we do things in balance, not to the extremes. Although I would really like to. Let's just agree that balance means different things to different people. Okay. So with that, I would like to think of those 4 midot as tools that help keep us going. Those 4 midot can be fuel for netzach, fuel as dedication to help us remember why we're doing something, to be maybe a little more resilient and a little more accepting, a little more loving, or a little more disciplined. So what I'd like for you to do is take the next couple of moments and match one of those midot, anava, chesed, gvura, or tiferet, with any one of your things that give you perseverance, that give you like a little more netzach, a little more, I can hang with this. I can be a part of this for the long haul. Okay. And again, while you do that, you're welcome to mute me for a second. I'll send you a message if you don't want to hear me saying out loud while I'm talking, if you would prefer like your own space, just so that people can have an understanding of how we do this work. For some reason, it takes a little bit of practice to do soul work. It's it's like, oh, but you can't really touch perseverance. Well, you can in different little bits and ways. You know, it took us like 5-10 minutes to kind of name ways that we touch on perseverance, but we had to take the time to do it. So I'm looking at this, and I'm definitely going to put like a gvura fuels my ability to like track things. I used to track like how much water I drank in a day, just because I knew I wasn't drinking enough, and keeping track of it kind of kept me on track and made sure that I got enough. And I've done that with food. I tried doing that with sleep, but I don't like sleeping with my phone with its like sleep accountability thing on my pillow, until I kind of like had that skill. So I would, again, like keeping the chain alive. I think like, okay, I'm going to use gvura to fuel that aspect of netzach. Interestingly, gvura will go right along with the boundary pushing as well. Again, my job is to use this skillfully and say, am I doing, like, again, simple, fun, and easy way to remember it. Am I using my powers for good or for evil? And I have a massive amount of strength, mental strength, physical strength, emotional strength, and spiritual strength. And God help me if I use my powers for evil or push more. I am incredibly blessed with external motivation in the form of my kids, all 3 of whom will absolutely put a stop to my relentless push towards, let's talk about this, let's do this, let's do this. And they will, with real strength, real gvura, and actually some tiferet, let me know their limits. And if I can encounter that and say like, excellent, I want to be in this relationship with them for the long haul. So I'm going to, I understand that I boundary push as a part of it keeps me going. And gvura and even tiferet are going to help keep me in check in a way that keeps those relationships alive. So again, just continuing to think about all of these things. I'm looking at one like, oh, okay. So my first one that I was thinking about, like my internal motivation, it first came to me as frustration, which then I sort of understood on a deeper level as my love of understanding. There is a story that my mom likes to tell about me where where when I was little, I wanted to be able to sing any song that anybody else was going to sing ever. And I would get enraged if I couldn't participate and sing the whole song with everybody, like from beginning to end. But like enraged, like a toddler would get enraged, full force, full strength. And my mom, yeah, exactly. And my mom, for my second birthday, made this incredible birthday party for me. She made these gorgeous cakes. She invited family friends and said, let's make a circle of love around Rebecca. And I had this little circle of flowers. And I have to get one thing that shows this as I continue to tell the story. Okay. So I have a picture to illustrate my perseverance to get what I want. It was as soon as they started singing Happy Birthday and I started screaming my head off that my mom realized she had made a critical error. And that was, she forgot to teach me the song Happy Birthday. And so, yeah, it was like, you better teach, I will be too frustrated. I have got to understand. I have got to be able to participate. That is a driving force and always has been. And so with that frustration, understanding now that that's a love of understanding, I will pair that with anava, okay? A sense of humility. That is why anava is the first midah to enter into any kind of soul work. That there is room for whatever shows up, and it is always, always fuel for continuing. And if I'm willing to meet it with a little bit of love, rather than just being like, oh, I'm not frustrated, or I don't want anyone to know this about me, that I have ambition, that I want things, that I'm willing to dedicate myself to it, or scream until I get it. I'd like to think scared, but maybe not, okay? I can meet those with loving kindness and find the right balance. And again, that keeps me going. So all of these things build on each other and build on each other. I believe our tradition is insanely gorgeous in how it's like, it's unfathomable to me of how these connections are made, that this was the Kabbalistic understanding of creating a sense of order and a strong container so that we can just move towards Shavuot another 3 weeks from now. And then we are, as a people, this strong container, able to receive a narrative and continue on and go on and move from there. So seeing as how we do not have to finish this, and in fact, we have about 15 more minutes. We won't ever finish this, but we are going to just do what we can for today. I'm wondering if there's one midah, one of the other 4 midot that you've paired with something that's like, oh, I think if I meet this thing with this midah, it's going to really help me with the netzach of it. We're starting to like put things together, if that makes sense.
Well, I am amazed. I know that this all came from me, and I know that I wrote all the things down, but I'm amazed at how interconnected all of them are. Like, oh, of course, all of them work to help me get to the netzach, get to the perseverance, the strive, the ambition, the stamina. that I wrote as my internal pushes was the desire to be successful and also for good health. And I think that that's very much gvura, my pushing towards being successful and disciplined and in alignment. But that my health is also a chesed, that or with chesed, I have to worry about my health. And the tiferet that balances those two things of the gvura and the chesed.
Cool. Thank you. What about you, Analia?
Yeah, I'm thinking also actually about ambition as related to gvura, but also to anava. That I think for me, sometimes my ambitions could be bigger and I could actually take up more space. And so I think there's like a combination of gvura, of like chasing the ambition, but also of like actually reinforcing the anava, of saying like, you have the strength to be bigger, both right now and also in your vision for what you can do. Yeah, which feels, I think for me, anava is basically always, as you say, sort of the cornerstone. And I think it feels very relevant here.
Wow, I love that. I love also how it's like you remind me that with all of these midot, it's sometimes about doing them a little bit more and sometimes about doing them a little bit less. And that it's a matter of where you are with that particular midah, with that soul trait, and sort of like each situation might need a different combination. It's like an equalizer on a piece of stereo equipment. You might need a little bit more of one, a little bit less of the other, as you adjust. So what I'd like for you to do right now is, again, like the possibilities of what can be done with all of these goes on forever. It's why it's nice to just have a little bit of gvura and take a limit, like a limited, take an hour a week to think about it, talk about it, give it some thought, and then let it do its thing. I'd like for you to choose either one of the things on your list or one that's kind of, now that I think about it, I would also maybe put that on my list. One of these things that could use a little more netzach in your life this week. Okay, so I'm going to just go back and look at my list, and I notice that I'm like thinking through things, and it's like I want to tie it back into something that I was thinking about last week. And I'm wondering if it's like helpful to keep kind of deepening it this week, or as one of my Musar teachers has said to me at one point, like, set it down, let it go. It's not serving you to keep kind of grinding your gears on that. So I'm just thinking. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Do you each have one? Okay, great. You do not have to say it out loud, but of course you're invited to if you would like. But what I am gonna tell you is I need you to have one long piece of paper. I just basically took my piece of paper and cut. You can cut or like just rip a strip of the edge off, okay? I made mine extra long, but it does not need to be extra long. And it has to have it doesn't matter even if it's blank or not, any kind of paper is great. But I do want you to have like some room to be able to write on it, okay? And while you're like preparing your strips of paper, I will explain what's happening. So there are all different kinds of tools for this practice of soul development, this practice of musar. And so, we've used hitbodedut, we've used chavruta, we've used a Vaad meeting, we've done some, like quiet writing and thinking, some sharing and discussion. All of those things are good. There's another one that's, you could just call it a focus phrase, okay? Something that you could tell yourself for a minute every day, okay? In an ideal world, you might have that phrase and just say it to yourself or say it out loud. Different traditions, different cultures have this tradition of mantra, of saying something again and again. While it is not a form of tefillah, it could be a form of tefillah, of traditional Jewish prayer. It absolutely could be. Just the repetitive, in our tradition, we have the tradition of saying psalms in honor of somebody, for healing, for all different kinds of things. So this is just all a focus phrase is. I would like to broaden what the idea of a focus phrase is. It can be a piece of text. It can be a song lyric. It could be an image of something. But based on what you've written down, I want you to write a phrase, a sentence, a word somewhere on both sides of your strip of paper. Okay? And again, while you're doing this, I will just keep talking so that our friends at home have a chance to experience what we're doing with us together. So again, it's just a regular strip of paper. I am going to go back to something around boundary pushing, where I am absolutely struggling with this idea of limitations. And I have to in order to keep attending to it in a way that's in service to me, I have to have like the fun part. I have to have something that I like to keep me going. And that is my understanding of infinite possibilities. Okay. So my focus phrase is my understanding. I'll use the word understanding of my limitations that's on one half is limitless. I'm a fan of taking opposites, complementary contrasts, and bringing them into dynamic balance. So again, mine just says, my understanding of my limitations is limitless. I recognize and hold fast that I have limitations, that I am limited, but it is my understanding. I'm trying to give the good part a better job rather than continuously being hard on myself. Okay, I notice a little bit of anava there. I'm making room for my limitations instead of saying, limitations, what are those? Meeting them with a little bit of chesed. Again, giving myself some of the part that I love. So it's not just work, work, work. And there is a real strength there, I believe, as I grow and understand my limitations. And then there's this idea of netzach, that it's limitless, that I will be able to do this forever. And that is mine. Would anybody else like to share theirs? Sure? Okay, cool.
Happy to. Mine is keep playing big. And I put the keep playing on one side and the big on the other side. I don't see them as opposites, but I see them as two different parts of the same phrase.
Yeah.
To keep a sense of playfulness, I think, is really important for me. And for that playfulness actually to be at the edges or beyond the edges of what I am thinking through. also feels important, and sort of marrying the two feels like a right combination.
Yeah. I love that. Can I just like also say it's like, I love that, like we've mentioned a lot, like, I love that feeling of resonance. Getting to know that feeling of when something feels like, oh, this is right, is always a good indicator. It's like, you could think of it as like, oh, light bulb went off, or like, oh, I love that, or my gut says yes. And like on all of those levels, being able to recognize that it's always, again, the quality of netzach. It's always an indicator that you're on the right track. All right, Yafshir, what about you?
I wrote, give it your all, because I need a push to really give it my all,
Okay.
but also just to take the first step.
Ooh,
So
nice.
give it your all and take the first step.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay. So for the next little piece, you will need tape. If you don't have any right now, I'm going to show you what's going to happen with my tape. And you can do it at the point when tape is available to you. Okay. We're going to make a mobius strip. It's a mathematical kind of miracle where it lets your, it lets you turn something on both sides, like without end. Okay. Different than, you know, a circle, as Amalia was telling me, she's like, so how about just a circle? A circle is fabulous. It's contained. There's something internal and external. When you have your strip of paper and you're almost ready to make that circle, but you twist it once, to me, and then you can tape it. Hold on. You suddenly, like, this to me is the metaphor of netzach for Vaad work. You can't just spin your wheels. You can't just go around and around and around and around in a circle. You have to know that you can like twist it and turn it, see it from both sides, and that it is a continuous plaything. And with that, I'll invite you to check in on your focus phrase and play with your mobius strip every day this week. And just again, thank you so much for coming. It is a continual opportunity for learning and growth for me, again, to experiment with this format. I'm grateful to Dan and Lex from Jewish Live and April for supporting all of these educators and people who have interesting things to say and do to come on. I know they're looking for more people. It is actually endless what people have to offer. So I invite other people, if you think you might have something that you'd want to put out there, to give them a call or connect with them on Facebook. And for those of you who would like to think about soul work, but in a strictly physical format, I teach yoga online currently. You are welcome to find me at Rebecca Sykes Yoga on Facebook, where both your limits and your limitlessness are forever respected and encouraged. So we'll see you next week. It's a very interesting Midah next week. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Becca,
Bye-bye.
thank you.
Bye.
I'll see you in a week.
Hey, ay, nine, 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 nine. Ya, na, na, ya, na, ya, na, na.
Hey everyone, I'm Alana, Wilderness Tourist Community Programs Manager, and want to introduce myself and welcome you all to the virtual village. In response to these uncertain times, we've
Right. We are live. We are Jewish Live. Well, Hitler never dreamed that someday there'd be a show called Jewish Live. You know?
Use all of our energy to create this virtual village space. And we are truly looking towards the natural world and asking it, what can this time teach us? As a part of awakening the earth-based traditions of Judaism, Wilderness Torah creates village life during our immersive land-based festivals by uplifting and encouraging the individual gifts of the collective community. 4 times a week in this virtual village space, you will learn with Wilderness Torah community members such as Leah.
The subject today is why can't Moses talk? It's not why can't I talk? Unless Dan mutes me, and then we'll do it by demonstration. When I was a kid, I started out on this path by studying every Shabbat afternoon with my rabbi.
Who are sharing their gifts, as well as longtime stakeholders in the earth-based Jewish movement. Would love to see a raise of hands for anyone that this is your first virtual village program. Awesome. Anyone who this is your first Wilderness Torah program. Great. Well, we're so happy that you're all here. We are committed to keeping the virtual village accessible and free.
And we would study it, as many people did when they started, with the commentary of Rashi. More and more familiar with Rashi, but just if anybody isn't, it's been about 900 years.
Torah in this effort, we welcome any and all donations, big or small, as we endeavor to provide Jewish wisdom and community building through this hard time. If you are new to Wilderness Torah or would like to find out more about what we do and how to get involved.
And Rashi was the first of the great commentators on the Bible, and he acquired a special place among commentaries because Rashi's commentary on the Torah was.
We'll share our website and donation page and a way to get on our newsletter. And just a heads up, this session is being live streamed and recorded on Facebook.
Hebrew book printed on the printing press. So anybody knows, you say, well, what was the first book on the printing press? You go, oh, well, the Bible. It was the Gutenberg Bible. But that was in Latin. The first Hebrew book on the printing press was Rashi's commentary on the Torah.
Uploaded a lot of our recorded sessions onto our website, so feel free to go online and check those out. And without further ado, super excited to welcome in Leah. Leah is an advocate for the health of people.
And not the Torah with Rashi's commentary. It was just Rashi's commentary. I guess they figured they had copies of the Torah enough that they needed to print copies of Rashi. And so that's always made him stand out among others. And
resilience, and shares a wide variety of pathways to support that. And we are so excited to learn some Qigong with you today.
Thank you. I'm grateful to be here and to share this.
I always wanted to do it. You know, I had a dream when I was a kid. Oh boy, I'd like to do that someday. And then when I grew up and I did a commentary on the Torah, my rabbi was still alive, and
I'm going to share a bit about how Qigong as an energy practice, as a life force practice, is connected to Judaism. And so
told him to tell him that, you know, I was coming out with a commentary on the Torah. And he said, well, you know, that's what you always said you wanted to do when you were a kid. And I actually didn't remember that I had said that when I was a kid.
And the word chiyut, chi, chi, chai, they both, chiyut means life force, and chi is like our elemental vital life force. And so there's this really interesting overlap.
So here I am, a self-realized little kid doing this thing that, you know, worked out. So this Irish spud.
There are many interesting overlaps between Chinese and philosophical and energetic history and Jewish practices. And so that's one of the ways in which the chi and the chiyut, so I'm going to call our practice today.
Where he met an Idaho potato and they fell in love. And they got married and they had a little sweet potato. And she grew up and the little sweet potato went to college.
Practice. And I'll try to use that word just to keep our connection to that as our source of breath and life. And also, when we think about the words Adam and Adam,
home and told her parents, I'm getting married, I'm engaged. And they said, oh, that's wonderful. Who are you going to marry? And she said, Rashi. And they said, no daughter of ours will ever marry Rashi.
And Adam being the one who comes from the earth, the earthling. And this practice is going to, as much as I'm inside, I, like you, if you're inside, I'm going to imagine myself and feel myself connected to all.
And why can't I marry Rashi? And they said, because he's a commentator. I hope there's some laughter somewhere out there. It's very frustrating for a speaker not to be able to hear the audience. Maybe if you...
That we're going to embody the elements within us and feel how there's this relationship between the earth and us, and how we are earth embodied in a lot of ways. And so
it says, like ha ha or LOL or something, you can hold up when I do something right. And if wrong, you could do this. We can work together even in
working with the 5 elements of Chinese medicine, which are metal, water, wood, fire, and earth. But all of those meaning like the Adama.
Desperate times call for desperate measures. So sometimes I'll try this on a class, and you could try it on your friends or whatever. If you say, who are like the 5 most important or the 10 most important people?
Is literally the earth, but we're thinking about it being like the full elemental world that we live in and how those elements live within us. So I'm going to move into our practice, and we're going to move through the different elements, and we're going to start.
Whoever lived. And you can imagine a lot of them will have Moses on the list, and Jesus, Muhammad, maybe Buddha, maybe Gandhi. If you change the question and you say, well, who are the...
To a basic practice to ground, to connect ourselves to heaven and earth. And so this will be a practice where throughout this next 45 minutes, 50 minutes, wherever we're at in our time, I want to invite you to close.
Influential people who ever lived. And then you still might get Moses. You might get Jesus, though some more learned might say Paul instead of Jesus. Muhammad was still.
Your eyes, once you've gotten the movement down, use visualization, use your breath, and see how deeply you can drop into your own body. Like, look at the screen when you need to see me and the movement I'm doing. And
make it. If you speak to an African-American community, they're entirely likely to say Martin Luther King, Socrates. So drop those. Let's try another angle. Let's say you're saying people, well, who are the 5 most?
Is great. Just see how much you can open up to letting the chiyut flow through you. Okay. So I'm going to show you Qigong stance. So my legs are straight and parallel. Not straight, they're parallel.
Famous people who ever lived. Jesus and Moses and Muhammad still make the list. Now, if you change that to asking people who are the most in any given area.
My knees are slightly bent, so my feet are parallel. So if you're standing and you look down at your feet and you notice that they're angled this way or angled this way, just see if you can bring them parallel and rooted and spread through your toes and start to open up the soles of your feet. If you have your shoes on.
The kind of thing like People magazine and Time magazine, the 40 most intriguing people of 2019, that kind of thing. So if you would ask people, military, if you go to West Point or to.
And to take them off so that you can feel the openness of the sole of your foot connecting down deep into the earth. So your knees are bent, so you have fluidity. But you're
officers and ask, they might say great conquerors. They might have Alexander or Napoleon or Genghis Khan, Henry V. Or if you ask in terms of science, Freud, Einstein, Darwin, Planck. If you ask in terms of art, you'll get a different group. If you ask in terms of medicine, a different group. If you ask in music, but if you just ask without
in your feet. So your upper body is loose. It's like your kelp in the ocean. And so your feet are rooted into the ocean floor and your upper body can swing. So we're just going to start with that. Just feeling yourself deeply rooted, and start to let your hands hit your body and wake up your chiyut. And as it connects with on the backside, your kid.
You usually get those first two that I said. My favorite was People magazine some years ago listed the 50 sexiest people. And they included my friend.
On the front side, your liver and gallbladder and spleen and stomach, you start to wake up and clear through these organs as well.
On Buffalo Mailer, he was listed in the 50 sexiest men in America. And I was really angry because that year I was 51. And you know, he pushed me off the list. So what can you do? But Moses will always be, maybe not on the 50 sexiest, you know, but on all the others. And that's where I'm going with all of this. And the point is that it's disproportionately people in religion who get that list before people stop to think about it.
When your arms hit your body, let that be your out breath. And you can make it a little bit pronounced. And we're going to slow it down and let your body just unwind and relax into center.
That other people say, no, George Patton, before they get to Moses or Jesus. I understand that, but I'm talking general trends here. People would disproportionately pick out people in religion as either the most famous or the most significant or the most influential.
And feel the roots go down from your feet into the earth. We're going to start to open up through the joints to prepare ourselves for the practice. So fluid movement through the shoulders.
Whichever way you define it. And the most common of all would be Moses and Jesus. And the big difference between Moses and absolutely everybody else I said in every category is he's the only one where we don't have any proof that he existed.
Just opening up. And then letting your elbows move it for you. Start the movement.
If you ask me, do I think there really was a Moses and that he's historical and that he existed? I'd say yes. I think there's sufficient evidence for us to lean toward that. But it's true, we can't.
Staying connected to your breath the whole time, and then your full arms. And let your gaze follow your arm as it comes back.
Prove it. We know him only from a book. That's the Moses we know. And what makes it more complicated is those of you who know a little about the origins of the Bible and how it came to exist, and especially the Torah, we know that it was created by several people, which means the person Moses whom we know is in a combined text by many different people.
And then opposite direction. Okay, and pausing, and then let's just open up and do some neck rolls. I know a lot of us have been looking at screens a lot lately. So open up through your neck so you don't get tension in there as you watch this practice, just slowly, slowly rolling.
This notion of the different authors of the Torah, you know, it's called the documentary theory. Some people still call it the documentary hypothesis. They're wrong, I'm right. It's the documentary theory. In fact, I'd say it's more than theory now. It's, look, here's how it is, would be the way we should call it. And if you don't know about this, I know a good book. Ask your friends, you know.
Stopping in any spot that feels especially stuck and just letting your breath come into there to help open. Your neshima, your in-breath, like your neshama.
Who Wrote the Bible is just one of my books. 5 of the books that I've written had to do with this, the different authors of the Torah. And I happen to have with me my only copy. This is the only one.
Your soul, no, your spirit. Inspiration, we bring in spirit. We breathe in spirit.
Of the world of where all the different authors of the Bible have been underlined in different colors. So you see, can you see that there? So like just on that page that I just opened.
Other direction. One more time. Good, and then scoop.
Opened. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 different authors and 2 or 3 different editors. So 7 people gave you that page. And so when it tells you about Moses, whose Moses are you getting?
Raise your shoulders up to your ears and let them drop. And squeeze them up. Inhale and let them drop. And one more time. And let them drop. Okay, and then we're going to bring our knees together.
Really a product of the people, of many different voices and thoughts, not just any one. And today, doing this, where you can read the different separate authors of the Bible, either.
So we're going to be holding this is going to be a workout for your legs to hold this stance. So I want to just invite you to bring your knees together and do a little circling, opening up through your knees, through the bottoms of your feet, and loosening your hips.
Together united. Learning that is, I would say, as necessary as learning the different languages that you need to be a Bible scholar. It's as necessary as the archaeology that you need.
Other direction. Good, and then from here, just a little bit of, like in yoga, the
to be a Bible scholar. This is the textual archaeology, and you don't get it without it. At first, it was simple. It was just explaining problems in the text. It was, look, the Bible here, it says that there were.
Inhale and open our spine, looking up as much as is comfortable for your neck, and exhale and bring your belly button toward your spine as you curve forward. Inhaling and coming into curved spine.
Many animals on the ark, but elsewhere it says there were a different number of animals on the ark, and it must be 2 different authors. Or here it used one word for a maid, and here it uses a different word for a maid. So when it uses that word, it's one author. When it uses that word, it's another author.
And then exhale. One more time, inhaling up. Exhale. Belly button toward the side.
Not deep, insightful level of doing it, but it was to explain different problems we saw in the text. And now it's come to much more than that. We've reached.
And just let your whole upper body be relaxed and keep your knees bent. If this hurts your back, and only go as far as you can.
Point where we know enough and can read each of those different sources separately and have a feeling for them, that we're rediscovering, for example, by this method, we rediscovered the first great author in history, the author who wrote what's called the J text, also wrote.
Let your spine elongate down to the earth. And then slowly inhale, and one vertebrae at a time, picking your head up, the last thing, inhaling.
The court history of David, that's the same person in the 10th century BCE. And it's the first prose known on earth. It's not just, if you think it's correct historically, then it's the first history in the world. If you think it's fiction, okay, then it's the first novel in the
all the way up. And bring your arms up. Inhaling, bring your hands together. And exhale. And then we're going to actually use our palms to draw the energy down.
world. But whatever it is, it's the first one of those in the world. Before that, people wrote poetry for a couple thousand years. Nobody wrote prose. And we wouldn't have known that without this documentary hypothesis as a first step to
into our body, and spread your legs again, coming back to the stance we had before. Okay, and we're gonna go into it now. So the first thing we're gonna learn is a practice called pulling down the heavens.
Like that. Or in my last book, where I was trying to reconstruct the history of the Exodus, how much of it was and what really happened and how it developed and became the way we see it now, we couldn't have done that without being able to identify these.
It's a practice that you can do any time of the day when you're needing to refresh your chi field, your chiyut field, or you're needing to replenish with some life force. And so this is a practice for connecting with the earth and with the heavens.
Different sources. We don't know the names of these authors, so that makes it also weird and strange that we have the Torah and we don't know who gave it to us. We can know sometimes what period.
And with that energy that flows through us, like in the Aleph, if you think about the letter Aleph in the print form, not the script, whatever that word is, the one that has a line through the middle. Aleph is Adam. It is
an author lived in, or whether they were upper class or lower class, maybe whether they were male or female, priest or lay person. But we don't know their names, so we give the texts different letters. That's the famous letters J.
And so we have a person, and one hand is reaching to heaven, and one hand reaching to earth. If you can see, I'm like an Aleph, right? So both in Chinese medicine and in Jewish tradition, we as humans are the bridge between heaven and earth. So here in this practice,
and which stand for the Yahwist, the Elohist, the priestly source, and the Deuteronomistic source. You don't have to take notes. You don't have to memorize this. You don't even have to buy my book. Yeah, you should buy the book.
Enliven that and remember that they were connected to so much that is bigger than us, and we here are the mix of earth and spirit. So bringing your feet down, feeling your roots going down, exhaling, rooting, open.
The rest is optional. And sometimes people write to me and write about it, and they say, well, Jay, what was he thinking when he did this? Or did E contradict himself when he said?
Up your perineum and allow a grounding cord to come down through your perineum. We're going to inhale and draw up earth energy all around you. So you can imagine golden light coming up all around you.
And that's a mistake. J, E, P, and D are the names of the sources. They're the names we use for the text. They don't refer to the authors of those texts. But people tend to personify them. And I used to fight about this. Anytime someone said, well, what did J?
Opening your fingers to the heavens to receive 10 streams of white heavenly light. So imagine 10 streams starting to come through your fingertips, and then closing your eyes will help you, and then pull down a stream of white heavenly light.
They didn't think anything. That's like asking, like, what did the brothers Karamazov think? It's not, J is just a text. But I think it shows our natural inclination to be drawn to human beings behind a book that we read. And so we got.
And let that pour through you. It's like a crystalline shower pouring over and through you, clearing anything that is stuck, helping you to really prepare yourself for this practice.
I don't know. I met some rabbinical students from the Jewish Theological Seminary, and they told me that they developed this little song that they would sing when they were taking the course. They would go J, N, D, N, P, N, D.
And then connecting with the earth again and inhaling up, drawing up that golden earth energy, opening up your fingertips to receive the heavenly light, 10 streams of white heavenly light coming down, and then pulling down a pillar of white light.
He wrote the B-I-B-L-E, and it's, you know, if it helps you remember them. Now, if you open up almost any book about this, if you go online and read what comments people make, or if you go to.
And pull it through you, down your central channel, clearing through you and down into the earth. And one more time, inhaling up. Opening.
Amazon and read the comments that people put about the source. And especially if you read the trolls online about all this, people will keep telling you, well, that used to be a consensus, that this is the history of the Torah.
To receive 10 streams of light and pulling down the heavens.
Not the consensus anymore. the consensus is all over the place. People believe all different things about the origins of the Torah. And we're living in this period of what we call in Hebrew, tohu vavohu.
Good. And then inhaling and pulling the energy up through your legs into your lower belly from the earth, your hara, your womb space, and then exhaling and sending it back down. And so we're just establishing this connection, feeling.
Which is Hebrew for chaos and shmeos, that they can't get together, and they say that there is no unity on this, that it's not the consensus anymore, which I'd like to describe to you my feelings about that, but I'm not.
How the energy from the earth and from the heavens feeds us, inhaling up to your lower belly, exhaling down. And then inhaling all the way up.
I can use that language. After all, we're not on a television network, so I can say whatever I want, but I'm a gentleman, and so I'm not going to say that that's a lot of bullshit, because that wouldn't be nice. But it doesn't go by
channel. Bring it up and clearing, turning your palms over and pressing toward the sky, and then let it fountain out around you.
It goes by evidence, and I don't seem to be able to get people to understand that it doesn't go by what the consensus is. I don't care what the consensus is. I don't care if the majority of my colleagues disagree. It doesn't go.
Take a breath into your lower belly. We're going to come into some releasing stagnation exercises. So these are going to be a little more active. And we're going to start
agree with me, that wouldn't make me right. Or if they don't agree with me, that wouldn't make it wrong. We go by the actual evidence. If you went by the evidence on the Big Bang Theory, right, for the first 50 years, the consensus was that it was wrong.
I'm in a yurt. It might get a little, you might hear some sounds of things rattling, but you're just going to start bouncing, keeping your toes, well, on the ground, of course, but your heels can come up.
Wrong in terms of the consensus until Hubble looked through his telescope at Mount Wilson and observed the heavens for years and saw clear evidence that everything in the universe was rushing away.
Up through the joints to clear stagnation from the joints and from the organs. So through your ankles first, bringing your attention to your knees, clearing from your knees. These are areas where chi.
It's considered the greatest single observation ever made by any human being ever. Somebody should name a telescope after him, because he really earned that. And that changed everything, because
you can get stuck and lead to injuries. So if we have flowing chiyut, flowing chi, then we have less likelihood of injuries in our organs and in our joints. So coming up to your hips and
opinion anymore. So you know the term Big Bang was originally picked for that event. I mean, it should be a more extraordinary name. I think of it as, the explosion of origin, or, the
reproductive organs, and really focusing some energy there in your womb space, your ovaries, your prostate, and through your whole.
But instead, we call it the Big Bang because that was said by Fred Hoyle, an English astronomer who didn't believe in it. He thought it was nonsense. So on radio, he said, "Oh yeah, right, like the universe began with some Big Bang, And then we got stuck with that term forever.
Pelvis, we hold a lot in our pelvis. So see how loose you can make your bum. Then letting that start to echo into your intestines and through your belly. Another place where you might hold a lot of stress. Anytime you want, you can make this sound with your mouth. It helps.
So stop worrying about the consensus and start worrying about evidence. Now, I don't mean to prove that whole theory today. This isn't about that. But I want you to understand that if I'm going to talk seriously about Moses,
to release any kind of stuck energy, and we often hold a lot in our jaws, so that helps release that. Moving up into liver and gallbladder and the stomach and spleen.
I have to have that behind me in my training to discuss it, like I have to know Hebrew and the other ancient Semitic languages to discuss it. And I have to have gotten dirty at least a little bit in archaeology, though I admit I'm not primarily an archaeologist.
And then into the heart and the lungs. You can make us.
Usually arrive every day in time for lunch, and sometimes wearing a white shirt, which always marks me as, what are you doing here? And but okay, what can I do? I was in the City of David excavations for 4 years.
Sh sound or a ha. Ha. We'll work with both of these sounds later. The ha is for the heart, and the sh is for the lungs, and then your shoulders. Let it go.
Never found anything. That's just my luck. I've never found anything archaeologically, and I've never caught a fish. I just have terrible luck with those two things. And it happened finally on the last day of the last year in the City of David.
And up through your neck, up to your third eye, and into your mind, and releasing stuck thought forms, limiting beliefs.
Excavations, I found a coin, and it turned out it was a quarter that I had dropped on the first day. So, how do you apply this then to Moses then? If we have a hypothesis, a theory, a notion of how...
Just seeing how much you can just let that all loosen up and start to flow down your spine. Let it flow down your spine, shaking it.
Together. And it's several different people wrote parts, and then editors put it all together. So now the Torah we read is like a big DNA molecule. The picture you get of Moses, I would say, is a...
Hearing through your kidneys. And down, out your tailbone. And into the earth.
Much richer picture than you would have gotten if any one author had written, even if the one author was a genius. As it happens, they all were, I really would argue all four of the main authors truly were literary geniuses. And you get a rich a picture of him.
Coming to a pause. We're going to inhale, draw energy up from the earth to refill. Come up onto the tips of your toes, and your heels are up. And then we're going to...
He's composite. He has a unique set of strengths and weaknesses. And indeed, Moses, therefore, becomes the first person in the Bible to have real character development. Adam, there's no character development, or Eve.
And clear it through one more time. Inhaling up. One more time.
No one doesn't even talk. And even Abraham, yeah, a little, but pretty much Abraham at the end is the Abraham you knew at the beginning. Yes. So Joseph is the first person you get in the story who...
Just let your body move for a moment, however it feels good for you to move. Close your eyes, don't watch me, just see what you want to do for your body. You can shake your legs out, because this is...
I said as a teenager, and by the end he's a mensch, and you see him grow as a person. But that's nothing. Moses is the real deal, where you see a person completely transformed from the person you knew at the beginning to the person you knew at the end.
You were used to standing at once in horse stance, so yeah. And we're going to come back and start to go into the elements, which
you knew at the beginning is a person who identifies himself as, I am not a man of words. He's not a speaker. Let's think about that. Freud, was intrigued by Moses.
Move through these practices. There are other, clearing exercises, but I already have lost track of time. So I'm going to start going in to the elemental practices, which are practices that continue to clear through the organs.
He, not only by Moses the man, the last book Freud ever wrote was Moses and Monotheism. And Freud also used to go to Rome and would go to the St. Peter's Basilica. Don't go to St. Peter's where the Pope is. Well, you can't go to Rome now anyway, but if you could, it's not St. Peter's where the Pope is, it's the San Pietro in Vincoli, the St. Peter's in China.
And also bring in nourishment to each of the organs and connect us with each of the elements. So we're going to start with metal in Chinese medicine, similar to in the Jewish rhythm of things. like the big holiday, a big holiday is
separate basilica somewhere else. So don't make the mistake I made when I was a student and got to Rome and completely missed my chance to see the Moses of Michelangelo because I went to the wrong St. Peter's. Though there's some pretty good stuff there too. Yeah. So
in the autumn. So metal is associated with autumn, with letting go, with the lungs, with the large intestine, with the emotion of grief. And so we're going to start with metal, and it is also connected with spirit. And so before we go into these manifestations of spirit, of chiyut, into some of the other elements that are more tangible, we're going to start with air and spirit. So coming back.
You get to see the Pietà, but you don't get to see Moses. But Freud would go and he would stand there in St. Peter's Basilica and stand in the shadows and stare up at the face of Moses, where it would seem like wherever you walked in the room, the eyes of Moses would kind of follow you around, and Moses and Freud really couldn't get away from that. And since you know, there's this thing that Freud saw himself as a new Moses, a person who's bringing a whole new
stance that we were in before, where you connect with the earth and inhale up, and then reaching up and connecting with the heavens, connecting with this place that we often look to as where spirit.
And having a group of followers and all of that, persecution, all of it. You can't blame Freud for having a Moses complex, you know. And I just happened to have with me
heavens and in the cosmic realms. We're going to draw down that white light we were connecting with before. And we're going to pause at the level of the lungs. Connect your thumb and first finger. These are your lung enlargement.
The Moses of Michelangelo, they let it out. This is a little smaller than the original. I was shopping around one weekend and I went to this antique store.
Intestine meridians, so we're also stimulating the meridians. And we're going to do a practice with focusing on the lungs and with expelling grief and any stuck energy in the lungs. So through your mouth, you're going to go breathe in as your elbow.
And they had this, it was just in white plaster, no color. And the sign under it said, "Statue of a Greek god, $10.95. So I paid the $10.95 and we took it back.
Elbows reach back and you're expanding through your chest to open up, and it's like you're filling a balloon, a white balloon. The color is white. And then from your elbows, you turn over and make the sound shh.
To an artist I know, Laurel Robinson, and we painted it, including, we did the horns in day glow. So they glow in the dark.
So breath, and then we come again. But see if you can connect with the emotion of grief and let your shh sound actually help it to move out, move.
And I have to be careful about that because I did that view of wanting to write another great Rashi someday. And I knew Chaim Potok of blessed memory, who wrote, some the books like The Chosen and The Promise. One of his books was called In the...
Okay, so here we go.
Which was about this young Jewish guy who wants to become a Bible scholar, and he goes and studies under Christian scholars at the university, which is my story. And in the beginning, this young Jew Bible scholar talks to his old grandfather, who says to him, "Watch out. You start out wanting to be a new Rashi, you end up wanting to be a new Moses." And I've always kind of kept that, in front of me. You got to keep your...
See if you can even expand and elongate each breath.
Control if you can. I've never been very good at that. So Freud was intrigued by that. And he even conceived of two different Moses is would that be Mosesitos or you know, if you want to make two of anything, they have a dual, which we don't have in English. It's you put ayim on the end of anything. So your two arms are your yadayim and your two legs are raglayim. And if you buy two Rolls Royce.
Inhaling, bring your arms toward your chest. Release your fingers, and then all that white light.
Ayim on the end of anything. So Freud had Moshayim, yeah? And they were two different Moses figures at different times who contributed to what became the whole deal. So I jumped from Freud, who's one of my...
Push that down, letting it go into your large intestine, into your lower belly. Inhaling and drawing it back up into your lungs. Turning it over.
Favorite people, one of my teachers, you know, spiritual, intellectual teachers, to my other favorite intellectual, spiritual teacher, which is Nietzsche. And Nietzsche wrote a book.
Your lower belly with it. Inhaling up. And then we're gonna pivot on our, you can pivot on your left heel, and we're gonna go into what?
In which he wrote about Jesus. And what he said there, right, he knew he couldn't get at the historical Jesus. And he didn't mean to do simply the literary Jesus.
And so another thing that metal is about focus and purity. And so find your focus. If it's comfortable for your neck, gaze out over your hand like you would in yoga. Extend through your thumb.
He was doing, as a psychologist was, he was interested in the psychological type of Jesus. That was his wording. He said, I want to get the psychological type of the Redeemer. You look at the person.
Really reach out to open up through your lungs and through these meridians. I want you to feel like you've gotten a moment where you're like, yes, I feel my warrior.
Who are we looking at? What is this man? What does he care about? What moves him inside and out? And it's an extraordinary work, and it moves me to say to all of us today, so what is the psychological type of Moses? Whether it's
strong spirit running through me, then we're going to inhale, pivot on your ankle again, on your heel, inhaling, drawing that energy up, opening up through the top of your head, reconnecting with spirit.
A story and he didn't exist, or we actually find, you know, a piece of petrified wood that says, you know, from Moses loves Zipporah, you know, carved inside.
And pulling it down, all the way down into your lower belly. Inhaling up to your lungs and pivot and do it on the other side.
200 BC on it. You know. So who is this Moses? And you say, well, if you want to do a Freudian perspective, everybody knows where that starts with Freud, but the father.
Inhaling, drawing up, opening to the heavens, inhaling.
Got to be with the father. And that continues to present day Jews. So they're always trying to rebuild and make bigger new synagogues, and always have the most important thing in the synagogue is the building fund. And that's because a colleague of mine says they have an edifice complex. So that's.
Inhaling and drawing it down. Inhaling up again to the level of the lungs and reaching out, feeling your strength, feeling your focus, feeling, yeah. Your
sign now, if we like. So she said, oh, well, that's great then. What is Moses' relationship to his father? And, you know, but there's nothing about that in the Torah. What you learn about the
Pharaoh, your warrior, and then inhaling up, opening up to receive all that Spirit wants to give us.
Other that might be of Freudian interest is that the father is married to his own aunt. So Moses' mother is also his great aunt. When I tell like my daughters about that, they go, ooh, so, you'll have to decide how.
All the way down to lower belly, inhaling up. Level of the lungs and reaching out. Inhaling.
Incestuously you're willing to go. So it doesn't really have, there is a background family. You get very little of that on Moses. Well, he knows his mother because it says that in one of the.
Gathering a ball of white light and drawing it down all the way to the lower belly. And up to the lungs.
This was nursed by his own mother and then later taken over to be raised in the royal house of Egypt. The problem is she keeps him until she weans him and then takes him to the pharaohs.
And down to the lower belly. And bring your hands onto your lower belly, connecting with your breath, feeling yourself in this bubble of white light.
House. But when did they wean? In those ancient times, I'm told, they weaned babies much later of age than we do now, because as you may have heard, we've never found an ancient refrigerator.
White light through you, let it permeate your cells. This energy of what we call metal, like spirit, air. Feeling your breath as the air that moves through our body.
Back wasn't invented yet. So really, you really needed a child to be fed by its mother's breast until a fairly late age. So I don't know what.
And the chiyut moving through your body. Good. Now we're going to move into why.
To know his mother as a child and to later in his life actually remember being nursed, which most of us don't. But even then.
And the organs of the kidney and the bladder. And the emotion that's associated with water is fear. And it's also the ancestral realms. So
movie. Nothing about their relationship. He has a sister, and she's a sister who is never named. People always say, oh, well, that's Miriam. No, there's stories later that say he has, there's this Miriam who's
our kidney chi, which many of you have probably heard of. If you ever see an acupuncturist, you've probably heard about kidney chi. So our kidney chi is really important. So the kidneys are like essential.
The story in Exodus 2, it just says the sister, and no brother is mentioned. Now that's in the J text. Now then I say there are these different authors and you wind
medicine and in Western medicine to the full functioning of the body, the adrenals, the kidneys doing their filtration. So this is going to be a practice to help strengthen, tonify our kidneys and connect with the element of water.
The green all winding around each other now. And in the e-source, there's still nothing about the father or the mother or the sister. We'll find out. In the e-source, you don't meet Moses till he's a grown man living in Midian as a shepherd.
And behind you. So if it's your right hand, bring it back and connect with your left kidney. So my fingers are over here, the back of my palm.
The other source, the priestly source, says, oh, no. He had an older brother and an older sister, and they are Aaron and Miriam. And that's where you learn that the father married the aunt. So you're getting this combined picture of a man.
The back of my hand is on my kidney. So your kidneys are about the level of your bottom ribs. And then we're going to come through a water wheel. So we use our other hand, and it's like we're coming through like a little stream.
Psychologically, and that won't end until the end of his life. It'll just get more complex. We'll come back to this. But for now, let's just note Moses is composite. Now, what does this composite nature produce?
And feeling yourself carrying this precious water, how much we love water. Thank you, water. Letting your palm turn over and let it flow down your arm like a waterfall right into your kidney.
Let me give you some examples of where it makes a difference in the story. Everybody knows the famous line, let my people go. If you look at it in the text in Exodus 5, it says Moses comes in front of the Pharaoh and he says,
Inhaling, and as you inhale when you're coming through the water wheel, let it fill your lower back, fill your kidneys and your adrenals. Inhaling, turning your palm over, exhale as the water flows down your arm right into your kidneys.
Thus says Yahweh, God of Israel, let my people go. And it's in the second person singular, the imperative. It's giving orders. To which the Pharaoh says,
while replenishing your kidneys. So whatever pace you go with this, I'm just going to invite you to close your eyes and really feel it. Feel the wateriness, feel it flowing down, feel your breath filling your kidneys.
I don't know Yahweh, and I won't let your people go. And that's the end of it. I was a consultant on the movie Prince of Egypt, where they had Ralph Fiennes did the voice of Pharaoh, which was a little weird because Ralph Fiennes was also
You also feel your spine rotating with this, and the kidneys are related to the bones. So when people
Nazi in Schindler's List, and he was Voldemort in the Harry Potter movie. So the guy has a very interesting cross section, as an actor. And in that one, they have him say, he's the Pharaoh, and he says, "I do not know the Lord, neither will I let your people go." And you're like, who talks like that? Even pharaohs, kings don't talk like that. So he was speaking fluent King James, Now, the interesting thing is, if you look in the text,
people have low back pain or bone pain, it's often related to kidneys being not as nourished as they like to be.
in the Hebrew, where Moses says, "Let my people go," and Pharaoh says, I don't know this God, and I won't let your people go. The next line, it switches to the other author, the E author, and he puts it differently. And instead of a second person,
One more time on this side.
imperative, you do this, it's in a cohortative, which is the first person, which means something like, let me sing to you, let me entertain you. It's the, oh, that I could. So
Switching your palm, bring that palm to the other kidney. I'm gonna start with the water wheel again. So come through the water wheel, inhaling.
wow, these two versions of how the opening meeting between Moses and Pharaoh go, and you make them now one opening meeting. It goes that Moses says, "You let my people go." He goes, "No, I won't let your people go." He says, "Oh."
And turning our palm and let the waterfall flow down your arm and right into that kidney. Inhaling into your kidneys, into your adrenals, giving them chiyut, giving them life force, exhaling and letting it flow.
Just kind of back off and try a second approach, a more diplomatic approach. Now, you only get that if you mix the two authors. If you read each one individually, you say, oh, isn't that interesting? Each one has a different approach.
Just go deep, go into your water bubble.
So, the device of recognizing the different authors, it's not just a curiosity, and it's not just to keep people like me employed. The function of it is really to show the richness of how a person in a text can be created by multiple authors. Which was, you may recall, why Moses can't talk. We Americans love great speakers. In politics, I don't know, the greats among our presidents usually
One more time.
And Kennedy. Lincoln is interesting because we don't have any recording of the Gettysburg Address, for example. You can only read it and say, well, yeah, that's a pretty darn good speech. And then you get actors to try to perform it. But we don't actually know that Lincoln was a great speaker. We know that he was a great writer of great speeches. In Kennedy's case, some of us like me lived it, and also everybody.
Slowly bring your hands in fists onto your kidneys on the back and rub up and down, giving your kidneys some warmth.
See a video of it and listen to it. And there's some people who've criticized John Kennedy and said, well, he wasn't a great president in terms of governing. He was a great orator. Now, I don't.
Energy. And then bringing your hands around to your lower belly, pausing here for a moment.
Not my business to judge political leaders, though. Lately, we all kind of have opinions about our political leaders. But on that one, I don't think we should argue about whether he was a great orator. He had
Feeling yourself in this vibration of what you just gave your body, connecting with the waters of if you're
special ability that certain kind of people have. They always use the word charisma at the time. Being the person with charisma is the person who says, let's go, men, follow me. And they do.
You can connect with waters of your womb, if you have one, or the womb space for everyone. This space called the hara, the womb, our creative center. There's water throughout our body.
Future, he made you believe things could get better. We could use him now. So there, I did it. I just expressed a political opinion, and I don't usually do that, but there you go. More an opinion about speakers.
And we all came from a mother, so feeling that lineage, that ancestral line that would come through the waters of the ocean, the waters of this earth. And we're gonna go.
People called Ronald Reagan the great communicator. I can only give it my own opinion in terms of as a speaker and speech teacher and all that sort of thing, that I never quite saw it. But he did have an ability, you make a point.
So one more practice for kidneys. And so I was speaking about the kidney relationship to the bones, and then the kidney chi, the kidney chiyut, like the energy field. And then we've got the Shen realm, which is more of the spirit.
Simply and clearly. And the best one I ever heard from Ronald Reagan was about the movie Casablanca. Many of you know that, Casablanca, you've heard it's a famous piece of Hollywood.
Realm, and then there's what's called the Ling realm, and that is like connecting way beyond to the cosmos. So it's kind of maybe like the four worlds, which I'm not remembering exactly what those are right now. So I'm just going to keep my terminology in Chinese medicine for now.
That, it was Bogart and Ingrid Bergman and Claude Rains, but the idea, the original was, it was supposed to be Ronald Reagan and Sheridan and Dennis Morgan in those roles. And then that they recap.
But we're first going to go into the Jing, which is the bones. So we're going to squeeze into our bones and compact energy in and feel your strength. Feel the strength of your deeply physical body. And squeeze your muscles,
And people have always asked that and wondered about that. And finally, I saw Ronald Reagan on a talk show, and they just asked him outright, well, look, that story about whether it was supposed to be you as the star of Casablanca, is it true or not?
Around your bones, squeeze around your central channel. Bring all that energy into yourself. Feel how your spine might.
Yes, I know. I've heard it too. It's a story everybody tells that it was supposed to be me, but it is absolutely not true. He said from the very beginning, it was very clear in the minds of Warner Brothers that they wanted Ingrid Bergman. So I thought.
Elongate with this. And then slowly start to soften, let your bones soften, let your muscles soften, and inhale into starting to feel your
Man ever said that was really cool. Give him points for cool. Now, if what we like in real life and in movies, we like those great speeches at the end where some
force circulates like about 3 feet around us. That's our personal energy field. And so start to feel yourself in that, feel yourself bigger than your physical body.
somebody stands up and turns around the whole plot of the movie by giving a great speech that changes everybody's minds. We Americans just love that kind of thing. And if you like leaders as speakers, then okay, what about Moses? The strange thing is when
your energy body, you don't have to do what I'm doing, just feeling that, connecting with what extends above and on all sides of you, but that is still your energy field.
first meet Moses at the burning bush, he meets God and God tells him what it is he wants him to do, and he clearly does not want to do it. And one of the 5 arguments he gives about why he shouldn't go to Egypt in that burning.
Breathe into that and expand it, expand into it. Behind you as well as in front. Above you as well as below.
He says, I'm not a man of words. Not yesterday, not the day before, not since you spoke to your servant, even now.
We're going to start to move toward the Shen realm, the spirit realm. And so you can open your hands and start to expand even wider and connect your consciousness, your awareness with this whole planet and beyond all.
It's interesting because the other expression that he uses, the metaphor, he says, I'm a man with a heavy mouth and heavy tongue. And what in the world does that mean? And there are several different guesses. Some people say interpretation.
That moves through everything. The chiyut, the life force that's moving through everything. And feel yourself as one part of that.
Analyses, theories. There are several different guesses about what that means, that he's of heavy mouth and heavy tongue. One is that it means he's not eloquent. And that it's a metaphor, I'm not an eloquent speaker.
Heart starts to open. This is where the spirit, the Shen, resides, is in the heart. And that's what connects all of us.
That's such an interesting one is because he just said, I'm not a man of words, not yesterday, not the day before, not since you started speaking to your servant. That's eloquent. That's really beautiful.
Then we're going to open even wider. If it's comfortable for your back, and otherwise just use your imagination to feel the Ling realm, the cosmic realm. So now we're like going up and out and feeling all of it.
When he said, if it means I'm not eloquent, he then went on to say one of the most eloquent sentences in the Bible. The second possibility that you often may have heard is that
the moon and the sun and the ancestors and this whole realm beyond, and feeling our connection to all of that. And feel yourself like a little star being just floating in the universe, the multiverse.
He had a speech defect. But while that does play a part in the Midrash, it actually never really comes up again in the Torah. His having a speech defect is not a particularly significant aspect of the story, although I've heard people play.
Being held, completely supported, weightless. And inhale and droop.
Again, that's why the 10 Commandments appear twice in the Bible. It's not because it's 2 different sources. It's because Moses had a speech defect, so they got it differently, so they wrote it down twice with differences. I don't think that's right.
Universal energy, that cosmic energy, the Ling, back through the Shen, back through the Chi realm, and all the way down into your body, all the way through your central channel. Down.
And there's the third possibility. When you look at an expression in the Hebrew, heavy mouth and heavy tongue, you see any metaphor expression in the Hebrew and you don't know what it means, what do you do?
bringing your hands here. And if you feel like it, I do one more, pulling down the heavens to gather that energy one more time, because that was a lot of energy for me.
And all my students know what you do. You look at everywhere else in the Bible it occurs. So does this expression, heavy mouth, occur anywhere else in the Bible? And it does. It's in the prophet Ezekiel. And
And drawing it in with gratitude. Thank you. Letting it permeate every cell of your inner universe.
God says to Ezekiel, look, I'm not sending you to people deep of lip and heavy of mouth. They would listen to you. I'm sending you to my people Israel. They never listen. Now, what does that mean there? It means foreigners, people who speak a different language. And that would make sense then. So if Moses, by saying I'm heavy of mouth,
all the way down into the earth and giving it back. Okay, great. Now we're gonna move toward a new element. So that was fun. I had fun with it. I hope you did. So we're gonna move into the wood element. And these are also relational with seasons. So we were just
heavy of mouth elsewhere means speaking a foreign language. You go, but wait a minute, that doesn't make sense because Moses knows Egyptian. He can go back there and speak Egyptian. He lived there as an adult. Then you go, wait, that's not what the text had said. When God's sending him back, God says to him, the text there in the burning bush, go now to Egypt, gather the elders of the children of Israel and speak to them. Moses' problem isn't that he doesn't know Egyptian.
Water is winter, metal is autumn, wood is spring. And so we're going to start really moving some energy here because spring is, and the energy of wood and the liver and gallbladder is a lot about transformation and birth and also like frustration and agitation. So we're going to start moving that and clearing through it and also like nourishing it with good, healthy liver energy and plant energy and tree.
Hebrew. Now that's kind of interesting already in itself. But then you ask, why wouldn't he know Hebrew? Possibility A, it's because no matter how young, how old he was weaned, it was a long time.
To all these plant beings who nourish our lives. And I'm super stoked to see some of you like that are outside. I usually do this outside, but I didn't have a good setup today. So this is.
And so he wouldn't know the language of his mother. But then, I just can't stop paying attention to the different authors of the text. The text in which he says heavy mouth and heavy tongue, or it might mean language, is the E text. Let me tell you about the E text. According to the J text in the preceding book of the Bible, bear with me now, we're going to go on a little trail here.
It's great. So for those of you who are inside, just again, remember to just like connect with what's out there. But this time we're actually going to find a green plant or a tree, if we can, out your window or in your house, some member of the plant realm that can represent the plant realm as a whole that we're going to connect with. And we're going to actually give an offering of what we're releasing and ask this plant to please compost it in the way that it knows how, or ask the tree to compost.
Abraham has one wife and one concubine. The wife is Sarah, gives birth to Isaac. The concubine is Hagar, gives birth to Ishmael. In the
the way that it knows how, like it does with our carbon dioxide. So we're going to do a practice to help clear through the liver and gallbladder and our whole solar plexus area. And this is going to be more active than anything we've done so far.
Source. Abraham has one wife, Sarah, one concubine, Hagar. Sarah gives him Isaac, Hagar gives him Ishmael. That's great. In the E source, there's another woman. Don't believe me, look in Genesis 25. It's right in the first verse. It says, Abraham then took another wife named Keturah. So when you're putting one of those lists, put together a list of the 5 most underappreciated people in the Bible.
Initial spinal twist that we did, moving from the spine, but your hands are going to come to the side here. And each time you twist toward that side, your hand's going to come out. And my thumb is coming directly off of my wrist. So I'm not like that. I'm not like that. I'm like in alignment, if you can do that. And my fingers are perpendicular and parallel to the earth. So it comes out like this, and my elbow is still slightly bent, and my shoulder is.
Without a doubt. Second might well be Keturah. Basically, if you pick the 5 most underappreciated in the Bible, it may come as a great shocker to you, but they're all women. In the case of Keturah, Abraham and
not out there. And then when we come back, and then the other one comes out. And we exhale. So we're just practicing the movement.
Keturah have 6 sons, one of whom is Midian. So the Midianites are descendants of Abraham, just like the Ishmaelites and the Israelites are. Now, this is great. Try this on your friends. Ask people, even learned people, some scholars and rabbis. I don't want to embarrass anybody, but ask them, who is Midian's father in the Bible? And they won't know. And it's Abraham. So now keep track of these Midianites.
Some more instructions once you get the basic movement down. So make sure that you're moving from the spine and not from your shoulders, because otherwise you'll hurt your back. So your whole spine is twisting and the arm is coming out like a whip, like because of it, okay? If it's uncomfortable, you're probably not doing it in a way that's great for your spine. So we inhale as the hand comes back and exhale as it goes forward. Okay.
They live southeast of where Israel is. They live like due south of what is today Jordan. And Moses, it says, when you first meet him in the east.
Hopefully most of you got that for the most part. Again, make sure your shoulders stay in alignment with your body and don't overextend, and that your elbow stays slightly bent so you're not overextending your elbow. Okay, those are some of the most important parts for the integrity of the body.
His father-in-law, a man named Reuel, who in this source, his name is Jethro, and he's the priest of the Midianites. Now, partly that's, I'm going to digress here for a moment to make a historical point. That's considered.
Okay, and twisting from here. Okay, so we're going to use the sound ho, and it's a strong one. And this is like no almost, you know, and it's like all the parts that are like emotionally frustrated.
Story. Why would you make up that Moses is married to a Midianite and his father-in-law is a Midianite priest? Where is there any percentage? You ask that in all historical study. Is this something that somebody would make up? And if so, why? And it seems a pretty likely story, precisely because it's curious that an Israelite would have that in the text. So if you look at the text,
you get to connect with all of that and like really like work it. Okay, so each time that we end up here, we're gonna go, ho! So this is not gonna be I'm not gonna do it toward you, even though like I'm not actually in physical presence with you, but I'm gonna turn toward a tree outside the yurt. And this is the moment where I'm gonna invite you to turn toward a plant or a tree. And you can look at the screen also to make sure that you have the movement right. My knees are still slightly bent, my spine.
Text in E, it says the Israelites are slaves, they're crying out to God. The Pharaoh thinks there are too many of these Israelites, so he has these 2 women, Shifra and Puah, who are the midwives of the Israelites, and he tells them to split when the
spine is staying in the center. And I'm basically like turning from my solar plexus and letting that be my origin point. Okay, so pick a tree or a plant. And first just.
If it's a boy, they're supposed to kill it. And if it's a girl, they keep it alive. And if you know the story, I'm sorry to waste your time retelling what you know. And if you don't know it, isn't it interesting? And so it says the
energetic level, admire it, say thank you for your life, thank you for all the life that you give me and all of us. Thank you for composting.
Good job, and they saved the Israelites. Next section where you get this e-source. And Moses had been shepherding the sheep of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. And whoa, wait a minute. That's your first introduction to Moses, and that's
and what I don't need anymore. Thank you for knowing how to do that. Okay, and so we're going to start, and we'll just start slow, and then I'm going to pick it up the pace so you can go with me with that or keep it slow.
They've never killed an Egyptian, never grew up in the Egyptian royal house, never fled to Midian. He's just in Midian. And it's there using a form that we didn't recognize until my lifetime.
Ho! Ho!
how to do the past perfect in Hebrew. All your Bibles, almost all of them, will translate it wrong. It will say, and Moses was shepherding the flock. That's not correct. It's Moses had been shepherding the flock. You get that? That's
Help! 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 Help!
That's one of the two great grammatical forms that we only learned in my generation. One is the how to do the past perfect in Hebrew, and the other is the passive aggressive, which is a new form that we've become very aware of.
Help! 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 Help!
You're not laughing. The passive aggressive, you see that? That's a joke. See that? I'll just stop now. We'll give you a moment to look that up. So the thing is, what does he do?
Help! 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 Help!
In Midian, he's just there doing his job. He's always been there. So at the burning bush, when he says, I can't speak, and if it means he doesn't know the language, right, he doesn't know Hebrew. He speaks whatever language it was that Midianites spoke.
Just let yourself really connect with the emotion. Let yourself feel any frustration, anger, whatever's like pent up, and like just let it go.
Now, there's one other source, the priestly source, which I have to throw in here. And it comes much later in the story. The priestly source doesn't much say anything about Moses' father or mother back there and raising him or his being in Egypt as a child or any of that. What it does.
And we're going to start to slow it down.
It was much later when Moses is in the wilderness with the Israelites. He tells the Israelites they have to go out and massacre the Midianites. And they do. It's a very terrible, horrible scene in the Bible where the Israelites massacre the Midianites, but they kill all the men.
And then as we come out, we're actually going to start to gather in healthy green energy, all that oxygen, all those nutrients. Thank you to the plants, and start to bring it in. So now we're twisting still, but we're gathering and receiving. Thank you.
Moses arrives after the battle and he says, wait a minute. You kept all these women alive. Midianite women are bad. They tried to seduce us to foreign worship, and you've got to kill the women too. And then they say, oh, gee, kill the women. And Moses arrives and they compromise after talking with God. And it's that if a woman's a virgin, she can live. That's okay. But any woman who's been with a man is killed. And that's what they do. That's what they arrive at the end. And you go, this is a terrible.
And then let your palms open, and we're going to clear through our liver, gallbladder, solar plexus.
And you think, above all, what did Moses say to Zipporah when he got back to the tent that night? CP, I did something bad today. You're not going to.
Hands on your body, going toward the center first, and then coming out. And letting your palms really press into your body, like a massage over your organs.
Oh, and by the way, since you are a Midianite woman who has slept with a man, guess what? So the good news I can tell you about that story is when it was written by the priestly author, which is like 8th century BCE, the Midianite.
And then letting that come down the outsides of your legs, your gallbladder channel, clearing through, releasing it to the earth. Inhaling, drawing up 2 streams of green energy up the liver channel, up the.
To exist hundreds of years before that. So he's just making it up. We never did it. It's a bum rap. The Jews never killed the Midianites. It didn't happen. The person writing the story is writing it hundreds of years after.
Insides of your legs, inhaling all the way up and reaching up and extending your branches. And we are becoming the tree. So extend your branches, feel your roots go down into the earth. Take care.
His point, though, was to kill the Midianite connection of Moses. And that's what makes it even more likely that the J and the E sources are right, identifying Moses with the Midianites, because the other source.
Your body. And just pause here for a moment to feel that tree or the plant that you were just connecting with. Feel that in you.
That we're related to the Midianites. So, in the combined Torah as we have it, the composite Moses as we have him, with J, Moses starts out in E.
I'm going to gather a ball of green energy now, bringing in the plants, thank you plants, bringing them into our bodies, all the medicine that they provide. And come all the way down into our belly.
Egypt, and then he goes to Midian. So when Moses is at the burning bush and he's afraid and doesn't want to go back to Egypt to save the Israelites, he has a different reason for not wanting to do it. It's that there's a price.
Up toward the solar plexus again. Bring your palms over your lower ribs, and we're going to do that one more time. So rubbing.
He has a different language, or that he doesn't feel he's eloquent enough. There's reason for him to be afraid. So at the end of the burning bush episode, in that source, God says to Moses, it's okay, go back to Egypt, because all the people who saw.
And then opposite direction. And come down.
Your life are now dead. And then he goes. And the heavy mouth business there is not necessarily about speaking the language, and it really could be understood in terms of eloquence, his saying he's not a man of words. And so now I want to just give you the last source.
Inhaling, drawing up the green plant's energy up through your liver channel, up through your reproductive organs, up the center of your body and out the top of your head.
The book of Deuteronomy is all by a different person. So it's called the D source because we scholars were really good at letters in Deuteronomy. So D, so that was good. And at the
grow your branches, root your roots through your feet. Strong like a tree and flexible to flow with the wind. Inhaling.
End of Deuteronomy, there is a culmination of Moses' last words. The book of Deuteronomy is the last words of Moses. It's his final speech before he dies. It's the first 30 of the.
Bringing in the medicine of all the plants, the trees, wood energy into your body, down to your lower belly. And then pausing, bring your hands onto your lower belly.
34 chapters of Deuteronomy. That's one speech. So you think about the longest rabbi's sermon you ever heard. This is longer. So your rabbi is entitled. Leave them alone if they want to talk. I mean, if they go an hour. That's nothing. I tried to read it in time, the 30 chapters of Deuteronomy, and it's 4 to 6 hours depending. Remember, if he had a speech defect, it's even longer. If he wasn't a native speaker, we don't know. So you're looking at a really long one. Fidel Castro was famous for that.
Okay. Shake out your legs for a moment. I hope that some of you have been doing that. I imagine you have. And we're going to move into fire. Connecting with fire, connecting with the heart and the
6 to 8 hour speeches with everybody sitting cross-legged in the sun in Havana. And, there are cultures that do this. Some Israeli politicians are famous that Menachem Begin could talk till, Mashiach comes.
Small intestine. And there's something called the Sanjiao, the triple warmer, but it doesn't translate so easily into English. So we're going to work with the element of fire and those organs.
So the idea of giving a great speech, though, a long speech, you go, all right, but Moses, you've led these people for 40 years. You're 120 years old. You're entitled to talk as long as you want. So he gives this 30 chapter speech.
So We're going to start this practice with a practice of self-love and a practice of bringing in and filling ourselves with that, and also sending out. So the heart, fire, the element.
Okay, what is he going to say? How do you finish that off? 40 years with people, 30 chapters of talk. Moses says there, you should look at it, it's chapter 30 of Deuteronomy, and it's verses 11.
The joy and, you know, any kind of heartache, we're going to like have an opportunity to just give that over, to like release with gentleness, or to send out joy and love. Okay, so.
And Moses says, because this commandment that I give you this day, it's not too hard for you. It's not too awesome for you. It's not up in the sky.
Like we're carrying a baby. Actually, let's start like this. So your hands are going to be like this. Bottom hand is perpendicular to the earth. Top hand is parallel. And turn toward the side that your hand is on top. So I'm turning
back down to us and tell us, and we'll listen. It's not across the sea that you say, who'll go across the sea, and bring it back to us and tell us, and we'll listen. But it's very close.
If you're mirroring me, then you're turning toward your left. And I pivoted on my heel so that my front foot is facing in that direction. And this is where we're going to push from here. So we're going to say,
and in your heart to do it. And you go, wow, that's one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard in a speech. That's amazing. And then you go, wow, this is Moses, who introduced himself to God by saying, I'm not a man of words. And now at the end, he's become a man of words. And so we name the 5th book of the 5 books of the Torah.
Ha. Ha is the sound for the heart. So we're gonna, when we say ha, you can either use that as an opportunity to release any anxiety or heartache, anything you're holding on to in your heart, or you can say ha and like make it like I'm sending love out to the world. I'm sending out love. Okay, so we go ha. And see, my spine is still aligned, so I'm not out here. Keeping the spine.
Which means words. It's the book of words. And you've seen Moses change and grow. Is it, I mean, I'm not a rabbi. I don't usually, try to then say, and so we can learn.
Turn the hands over, and it's like we're cradling a baby as you come through the center, and inhale and fill yourself with pink light and self-love. So a bubble of self-love, pink light filling you as you come to the other side. Pivot on your.
And I don't mock rabbis when they do that. That's their job. It's not usually seen as a scholar's job, but I'll do it today. You can learn from that, what these 4 authors created together, that people can change.
Feel the opposite hand goes on top, and ha. So let yourself really connect with either the anxiety or the heartache or the love, and see how much you can really like feel it in your body. And
is that too hard? People can rise to an occasion. And if you want relevance, us in our lives now, today, are called upon to rise to an occasion.
Just do a movement, okay? And I know it'll take a moment to get the movement, but turning the hands over, inhaling. Close your eyes, feel yourself filling with pink and a bubble of self-love. So just like filling up, like you're carrying.
An occasion that we didn't see coming just months ago. And we can do it. You can do it. Because it's not too awesome.
And exhaling. Ha. Inhaling the tenderness, the love.
For us. And it's not too far off. It's not in the sky to say who will go up to the sky and get it for us and let us hear it and we'll do it. And it's not across the sea to say who will go for us and let us hear it and we'll do it. Because the thing is very close to you, in your mouth and in your heart, to do it. I'm not a new Moses or a new Rashi, let alone. And I know that I can't say it any better than that. So that's it for today, everybody. Stay well, be well. You want to talk, Dan, or?
Yeah, so if anybody has questions, they can think that was really great. So you can either put your questions in the chat, or if you'd like, you can electronically raise your hand, which I see Alina has done. So I'm going to unmute Alina. But if you have questions, if you press on the participants area on the bottom of the Zoom screen, then you'll see a list of participants. And at the bottom, there's a little picture of a hand, and that's the hand raised. And that way I'll know to unmute you to ask your question if you would rather talk and not put it in the chat. If you would rather put it in the chat, then you're in fine company with Moses, who didn't want to talk either. But I'm trying with the jokes. Okay.
Hello,
so
is that your husband standing there behind you?
Yes.
Hi, Dick.
And what I wanted to say is, happy birthday, Dick. Cinco de Mayo. I always remember.
Oh, yeah, you gave it away, yeah.
It's
actually tomorrow, you know, but.
Yeah, but it's and also it's so nice to hear Janet, laughing there.
Janet is over there, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's all I want to say.
That was very sweet of you to come on and say that. I appreciate that. And when you next see me, everybody, I'll have crossed to even closer into the age group that's not too safe now. So I'm just staying in the house.
Yeah. So
74 tomorrow. Years.
Thanks, Dick.
Hey, Tom. Well,
we have a lot of comments of appreciative comments about the jokes. So even though you can't hear the people laughing, that you, and it's why it's great that you have your own laugh track, and I think it's great.
Yes, that's why.
Yeah.
I married Janet for her laugh. It's pure self-interest,
Yes.
Also,
Alina, I think Alina's hand is up again. So.
No, it isn't. I don't know how to.
Oh, that's me. Okay, so I put it down. Sorry.
Okay.
Any comments?
Yeah. Any other comments or questions or thoughts? Is there? I have a question about the. I forget if it was the J source or the E source where Moses is initially introduced as the man of heavy tongue. Is there any way? I suppose there's no way to know, but is there any kind of way to guess at the characterization of Moses? Like, was there an end? Was there a way that maybe the story ended that was lopped off, and then then D becomes the full edited version? D is the conclusion of the story. But is there any way to understand sort of how the previous sources may have seen Moses as a character, particularly in that regard, since you're showing that how that's resolved by Deuteronomy, but how was it resolved before Deuteronomy? Oh wait, I think you're muted. Let me fix that. Okay, sorry.
Each of the sources shows development in Moses. I said he's the most developed character that far, and there won't be any other person in the Bible with that much character development until David. Mm-hmm. It's only the two of them, the two who got Michelangelo statues. I guess that's why they got the statues, because they're the two developed characters. And in the E source, you see Moses grow and grow, where at the beginning, he keeps saying, you'll see, he always says to the people when they relate to him too directly and say, look what you did to us. He says, no, this is not me. This is God. And he keeps doing that. Joseph had done the same thing. It's not me, it's God. It's not me, it's God. And then he comes to the 10th plague. And it's the day before the slaying of the firstborn, the 10th plague. And if you look at that, you'll find it in Exodus 11, where Moses says to the Pharaoh, about midnight tonight, God will go out. God says, I will go out through the land of Egypt, and I will strike everyone from the Pharaoh's child to the child of the maid sitting behind the millstones, and there'll be and all the animals firstborn, and there'll be a great cry through all the land of Israel, all the land of Egypt, but not a dog will wave its tongue against the children of Israel. And then your servants will come down to me, and they'll bow down to me and tell us go, and then I'll leave. And then so Moses, he's lost it. He really loses his temper big time, and he talks to the Pharaoh way different from the same guy who said, oh, that we might go. He's now really talking tough. And the interesting thing is, at the beginning of that paragraph, if you look at it, it says, thus says Yahweh, God of Israel. So he's quoting God. But by the end, he says, but then me, they'll bow down to me, and then I'll go. And he's clearly talking about himself at the end. Remember, the Bible, it was written, they hadn't yet invented quotation marks and periods and semicolons and all that stuff. So when you're a modern translator of that, you don't know where to put in the period and the quotation marks. So that Moses actually reaches a point where he's now become so close to God that he starts talking like God, and he slipped. And then when you put that together with the priestly source, where Moses has always been so obedient to God, and then you come to where God tells him to speak to the rock, and he hits the rock, and he says, shall we bring you water? When he should have said, shall God bring you water? All of those things that happen, you see Moses has reached yet another level. And then he dies. And he makes his great speech and dies. So the character development that comes in seeing him going from not a man of words to in your mouth, in your heart. I mean, when you see that happen, you don't just read each of those and say, oh, good, big jump. No, you see all the steps all the way. So no, I can't claim that each of the authors had the same direction in mind, but every single one of them contributed to developing it. It's amazing.
Sometime, I don't know what your plans are for future lectures, but I would be fascinated to hear your
live.
Well, I'd be fascinating to hear your take on the exchange at the burning bush, because right there's part of it is where no, not the burning bush, where basically Moses, no, it is at the burning bush, where Moses basically says, here comes your brother, he's a man of words. But he says he will be your mouth and you will be his God.
Yeah.
Right. And that's an interesting phraseology.
Yeah, it is used metaphorically. God says he will be a mouth to you and you will be a God to him. Right. So but not literally.
No, but I mean it's interesting that language is used, and how does that relate to?
Yeah, it's very powerful. And God also says in one of the other sources, see, I have made you a God to Pharaoh. So two of these different sources who don't agree on much of anything, they agree that there's something, a lot of imitatio Dei, in Moses.
Yeah. So Norma has a question. So go ahead, Norma.
Actually, too, Dick, you referenced your childhood rabbi, and of course, we know Rabbi Abramowitz, a beloved memory. Do you share your lectures with Rabbi Perlson?
No, I've never met him.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
he's the current rabbi of the synagogue where I grew up, but I left, I left Miami in 1968, and occasionally, now I only go back for family events. So no, I have not.
Okay. I wanted to know, because I see the recording thing flashing, if you archive this lecture, because I want to send it to my rabbi, and actually I'm in correspondence with Rabbi Perlson. I'd be willing to send it to him as well. Phenomenal lecture. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much. I want to say, since I mentioned, I think in the very first talk, or somewhere back there, I point out, that I did go to seminary for 3 years, so I'm 3/5 of a conservative rabbi. If I perform a wedding, they're only 3/5 married. If I do a funeral, you're not really dead. I mean, it's like that. Despite having left the seminary, I believe all is forgiven. I mean, I've been invited back there and I've lectured there since then. And if I said to you, but some of my best friends are rabbis, but it's true that the rabbinate, not only conservative and reform, but Orthodox and Chabad have been nothing but courteous to me my whole career. And so yeah, I'm happy if you show it. I mean, a rabbi who's clearly of a different background, but It's been pretty good. When I was writing my commentary on the Torah, I'll hold it up again. See, I'm acting like an author here at a books. We can't do book tour anymore, so we do Jewish Live. When I was writing my commentary on the Torah for the couple of years before that, every Shabbat I would go to a Torah study led by a Reform rabbi, Rabbi Lawson, who was here last week. I don't know if he's there now. And among us, oh, son of a gun. And I would go to him every week and listen to his Torah study. And also every week, my children were in an Orthodox Jewish day school, so I would go to a meeting about the parasha that was led by Rabbi Weiser, who was an Orthodox rabbi. And so I had an Orthodox rabbi's take and a Reform rabbi's take, and their communities, their respective communities, sitting there with them every week for a couple of years while doing that. It's amazing what that'll do for you. So sure, show it to your rabbi, and
Okay.
if he doesn't like it, he's wrong.
It's archived then?
Yeah, so I'll just add, so all of these lectures are archived at a page. It's www, I put it in the chat also, but it's www.jewishlive.org and then /return to Torah. So, and they're also on Facebook, but you can also find all the previous talks from this series there. So I hope you see it in the chat.
Yeah,
No, but I just.
this one,
Okay.
pick it up.
There we go. Got it.
Yep. Okay, great.
Thank you.
So Dan,
Yes.
you're the voice of God over this series here.
Right. Well, I think we've reached the end of the hour. We discovered that it's your birthday and my birthday tomorrow, so it's
Yeah,
a very
we learned
exciting.
that.
Yes, so it's a very exciting time. So thank you.
Pueblo.
Right. So thank you everybody for being here. We'll be here back at the same time next week for the lecture that is entitled. Can you remind me?
Yes, it's about leaders, and it was who needs a king when we have a God? Wasn't that it? Why do we need a king when we have a God?
Yes. So that sounds very, very great, and we look forward to seeing you here next week. Thanks.
Elise, is there a reason why I can't see anyone?
I think that we just need to change it to a gallery view. Does that work better?
Say that again.
Can you see people?
I can see like 3 people. I think maybe it's my bandwidth issues today. I'm not sure. I mean, let's give it 1 minute and then we'll just get started and I'll deal.
Okay, perfect. We have 108 people in the meeting right now.
Wow. Wow.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I would say good to see you, but as of right now, I can't see anyone today. I hope that this works well. I'm having some bandwidth issues, so you'll speak up in the chat box, please, if you find that you're not able to hear or if I keep breaking up. The source sheet is in the chat box or will be. We are going to explore together today Psalm 139. Psalm 139 is one of my favorite prakim, one of my favorite chapters of Tehilim. It is really, in many ways, quite difficult and elusive. I'll just tell you at the outset, in order not to have you kind of fall apart in terror as we go, there are a few verses in this text that are extraordinarily hard to figure out. Simply the pshat, what's going on in the Hebrew. But what I want to say is just a couple sentences before we read it out loud. One of the things that I find interesting about this text is that it gives voice to something that I think is really interesting and in a way surprising. We can add it to the list of the things we find surprising that Sefer Tehilim, the book of Psalms, allows itself to give voice to, which is the sense of ambivalence about whether God's presence is desirable or not. You know, some biblical texts wrestle with the problem of what appears to be God's absence, but in fact, in this text, we have something very different, which is what do we do with the overwhelmingness of God's presence? What I want to suggest is literarily kind of provocative about this text, among other things, is the ways that ambiguity is used as a tool for expressing ambivalence. That is, if you use words that mean one thing and its opposite, or that can mean one thing and its opposite, we'll see examples of that in a few minutes. If you invoke words like that, that is a very powerful way to alert the careful reader that perhaps there is kind of more going on in this text and in the experience that underlies this text than we might at first be inclined to think. I would even go so far as to say that this text kind of revels in its own ambiguity. It delights in its own sense of the multiplicity of meaning. Now, because I can't actually see anybody, I'm going to read this one. I'm going to read it in Hebrew and in English. I just don't want to call on anybody. I don't know, I don't want to interrupt you while you're eating a sandwich or something, okay? Lamnatzeach leDavid mizmor. For the leader of David, a psalm. And for those who are joining us for the first time, I'll read it all the way through with the JPS translation, and then we will talk about some of the ways that it's in fact quite a difficult text. Adonai chakartani vateda. O Lord, you have examined me and know me. Ataya data shivti vekumi. Banta l'rei merachok. L'rei merachok. Forgive me. Sorry, you know what? I'm having trouble seeing this. Let me get a bigger printing. Okay. When I sit down or stand up, you know it. You discern my thoughts from afar. Or chiveriv izerita, v'chol derachai hiskanta. You observe my walking and reclining, and are familiar with all my ways. Ki ein mila bilshoni, hein Adonai yadata chula. There is not a word on my tongue, but that you, O Lord, know it well. Achor vakedem tsartani, vatashet alai kapecha. You hedge me before and beyond and behind. You lay your hand upon me. Pli'ad da'at mimeni, niskiva lo uchala. It is beyond my knowledge. It is a mystery. I cannot fathom it. Ana elech meruchecha ve'ana mipanecha evrach. Where can I escape from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? Imesak shamayim shamata va'atzia sheol hineka. If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I descend to Sheol, you are there too. If I take wing with the dawn to come to rest on the western horizon, even there your hand will be guiding me. Your right hand will be holding me fast. Va'omar achoshech yeshufeni, v'layla or ba'adeni. If I say, surely darkness will conceal me, night will provide me with cover. Gam choshech lo yachshich mimeka, v'layla kayom ya'ir, kachashecha ka'ora. Darkness is not dark for you. Night is as light as day. Darkness and light are the same. Ki ata kanita chilyotai. Tisukeni beveten imi. It was you who created my conscience. You fashioned me in my mother's womb. Odcha al kinoraot nifleti. I praise you, for I am awesomely, wondrously made. Niflaim ma'asecha v'nafshi yodaat me'od. Your work is wonderful. I know it very well. Lo nichad atzmi mimeka, asher useti vaseter. Rukamti betachtiot aretz. My frame was not concealed from you when I was shaped in a hidden place, knit together in the recesses of the earth. Golmi ra'u einecha va'al sifrecha kulam yukatevu yamim yutzaru v'lo echad bahem. Your eyes saw my unformed limbs. They were all recorded in your book. In due time they were formed, to the very last one of them. Vili maya krure echael, ma'atzmu rashehem. How weighty your thoughts seem to me, O God. How great their number. Asaprem michol yerbun. Sorry, espere michol yerbun. Hekitzoti ve'odi imach. I count them. They exceed the grains of sand. I end, but I am still with you. Im tiktol Eloah rashav anshe damim surumeni. O God, if you would only slay the wicked, you murderers, away from me. Asher yomru chalim zima, nasu lashav arecha. Who invoke you for intrigue, your enemies who swear by you falsely. Halo misanecha Adonai esna, uvitkomemecha et kotat. O Lord, you know how I hate those who hate you and loathe your adversaries. I feel a perfect hatred towards them. I count them among my enemies. Sorry, I actually went ahead. Sorry. Tachlit sin'ah sinetim le'oivim hayuli. Chokreini el v'da levavi. B'chaneni v'dasar apai. Examine me, O God, and know my mind. Probe me and know my thoughts. Ure'ei im derech otzev bi. Unecheni b'derech olam. See if I have vexatious ways and guide me. Okay, this is a difficult text, as I say, on many levels. So let's see what we can do with this. First, I want to say a few sentences kind of by way of introduction, and then as always, we'll walk through the text verse by verse. So let me begin perhaps by saying that I think it is important to be careful here, and maybe this is a conversation that's internal to biblical scholars, but I think it is important that we say that we try to avoid metaphysical formulations of what are ultimately relational descriptions. Now, to say that as a normal person might say it. In the Jewish Study Bible, for example, Mark Brettler and Adele Berlin introduced this psalm by saying, God knows all that can be known. He is present in all places. No one can escape his reach. That is accurate, but I think that the key point here is less that God knows all that can be known. It is not some claim about a philosophic notion of divine omniscience. It is God knows every last thing about me. There's a danger, in other words, of trying to abstract too much philosophically. Brettler and Berlin basically say that, but I think it's important to note that, and we'll see why I'm saying that, I hope, as we go. The ending of this psalm is a little odd and surprising, and for some people disturbing, and it in some ways is of a piece with, or arguably of a piece with some of what we talked about last Thursday about Psalm 137. But the ending notwithstanding, this essentially appears to be a kind of meditation on God's ability to pierce inside our innermost thoughts and feelings, and on the limitations of our knowledge and understanding, and on the ways that God's presence fills all of the world. And we'll see that played out again in just a moment. Now, what I should say that when scholars read this text, they tend to hear a lot of different things here. There are scholars who find this to be a pretty straightforward reflection on how wonderful and wondrous it is to have God watching the psalmist and being with him at all times. There are actually very good scholars of Psalms and Tanakh who say this, but I have to confess, I don't find that to be a persuasive reading of what's going on here. I think it is more likely, and as always, you are of course free to dissent from my reading, that what we have here is a problem and its resolution. If I'm not sure resolution is the right word, but let's go with it for now. The problem appears to be that God's presence and God's constant watching make the psalmist feel hemmed in, make him feel small, make him feel that he has no space in which to live and operate. And the solution, if you will, the resolution is that when he discovers that God has always been operating not just from outside him, but also from inside him, from the time he was just a fetus, then somehow it shifts for him. Somehow the idea that God is only outside him and, as it were, pressing down on him feels oppressive. But the idea that God is also within him and, as it were, making him grow and flourish appears to heal some of what feels oppressive about God being perceived, experienced, thought of as primarily or perhaps exclusively outside him. You could argue, I think, that the real shift in this psalm takes place in verse 13. That verse 1 to 12 is the kind of disturbing, unsettling presence of God. And in verse 13, we have a bit of a shift where what was formerly oppressive is now also, in a way, comforting, reassuring, and even enlivening. At least that's what I want to propose. And here, probably the Bible scholar whose reading of this is closest to mine, for the few of you who I know are Bible scholars on this call, is again Richard Clifford, who I've mentioned before. On this particular psalm, I think his reading is particularly nuanced and helpful. But I guess I would ask you, as we are going to read through this, to ask yourselves whether it's a personal experience or kind of an intellectual thing that you've considered about the relationship between experiencing God's presence on the one hand as a threat, and on the other hand as the most powerful, most hopeful, most beautiful source of salvation and help. How do you make sense of the simultaneity, if you will, of both of those experiences, or at least of the idea of making space for those two kinds of experiences? Now, those who are kind of scanning the text that I read, you will note, I think, that at minimum verses 3, 11, 16, and 20 are all very hard to figure out the Hebrew of, and we will do our best to make to get them as clear as we can. Okay. So let's turn to verse 1. Okay, so we have here again, Lam Natseach LeDavid Mizmor, for the leader, LeDavid, for David, a psalm. And I've talked many times, and I won't do it again lest I drive you crazy, about all the different things the word LeDavid might mean. We have here him saying, Adonai chakartani vateda. God, you have searched me, you have examined me, and know me. And then, Ataya data shifti v'kumi. You know my sitting and my going. That is, of course, an expression which is meant to comprise the whole of his life. You can see in the supplemental sources, Deuteronomy 6, B'shoch b'cha u'v'kumecha. The same idea, b'shifti u'v'kumi. God, you know the entirety of my life. Now, I want to just for a minute, though, draw your attention to the emphasis here. We don't have in verse 2, Yadata shifti v'kumi. You know my sitting and my going. But rather, Ata yadata shifti v'kumi. And when Ata is used in that way in a biblical text, it is the emphatic. That is to say, and here I'll quote the Bible scholar Patrick Miller, a great Bible scholar who just passed away in the last couple of days. Miller, commenting upon this psalm, says, you know in a way that no one else does. And Miller adds, perhaps even better than I myself know. It is you who knows my sitting and my going. Banta l'rei merachok. You are the one who knows all of my thoughts, even from afar. Here, I want to just underscore something that many of you know is one of my life's obsessions in the more philosophical, theological mode for me, is that we have a very clear indication here that God is interested not just in actions, of course, but what is going on in the inner world of the psalm, that God examines his inner world. That seems like a point that shouldn't need to be made, but in light of some of the ways Judaism has been popularized and I would say distorted, it is important, in fact, to note that. And then verse 3, this is quite a hard phrase. JPS says, you observe my walking and reclining. Robert Alter, in a true literal translation, renders my path and my lair you winnow. Then the idea of rova, which is similar to resh bet sadi, indicates a place where the animal rests. And zerita is a term from agriculture, which means to winnow. The way JPS gets when I sit down or stand, wait, I just lost my place. I'm sorry. You observe my walking and reclining. The you observe is their derivation from the winnowing, that is to say, to critically assess something. Now, notice here that we have two merisms, two, A to Z expressions. In the last verse, we had shivti v'kumi, and now we have orchi v'riv'i. And this is a kind of double way of emphasizing the idea that God knows absolutely everything, the sheer totality of God's knowledge. There's nothing about me that you don't know. Okay, and if we move to verse 4, Ki ein mila bilshoni hein Adonai yadata chula. Translators and interpreters of this verse disagree about whether the idea here is that God knows what I will say before I say it or as soon as I say it. If it means as soon as I say it, then the thing that is stunning to the psalmist is you are far away. We just said that you are merachok, and yet you're monitoring everything that I say and do. Everything that I say, as soon as I say it, you know it. Or perhaps it means you're so inside my thoughts that before I can even utter them, you know it. Here again, notice the sort of totality of God's searching knowledge. Achor vakedem tsartani. JPS, you hedge me. NIV and NRSV similarly, you hem me in. Now here is the first example, I think, and here I'm indebted to a Bible scholar named Carolyn Pressler, that the root sarar, tzadi resh resh, can mean protect or besiege. Is God protecting the psalmist as those who read this psalm as kind of univocal and unambiguous, a statement of praise for God? And is God besieging the psalmist? Think of the expression, the next half of the verse, vatashet alai kapecha, which I will translate here as, you laid your hands on me. Well, here the English does a very good job of capturing the ambiguity of the Hebrew. If I say to my nurse, I'm really sick, lay hands on me, or if I say to my enemy, don't lay your hands on me, right? That phrase is inherently ambiguous. And to give you again a sense of what I mean, the ambiguity here, I think, is an expression potentially of the ambivalence of the psalmist. I mean, I could experience it on some level. I experience it as God. You care enough about me that you're with me. And at the same time, get away. I need some space in which to breathe. So the same thing that can be a source of comfort can also be feeding a sense of oppressedness. Okay. Verse 6, Pli'ad da'at mimeni, niskeva lo uchala. So, JPS, it is beyond my knowledge. It is a mystery I cannot fathom it. You might translate Pli'ad da'at mimeni as such knowledge is too wonderful for me, from the word pele. It could be threatening, right? It's just beyond my fathoming how you're just inside my head and my being all the time. And it could be an amazing expression of God. You know absolutely everything. You watch everything. Okay? Now, I want to at least note that Pele in Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, can suggest not only wonderfulness, but also something being extraordinarily difficult to do or understand. And I believe I gave you in the source sheets Psalm 131:1, Job 42:3, Proverbs 30:18. They're down. Ruben, if you want to scroll down for 1 second, we can find them. So if it means I can't figure out what this is all about, it's too much for me, there's a very different feeling. Okay? In other words, if there's some negativity here, that seems to be helpful to what comes immediately following. Now, I'll mention something else that may be far-fetched, but that I think is perhaps interesting. Nisgeva lo uchala, GPS, as I said, renders it as a mystery. I cannot fathom it. But lo uchala can also be ambiguous. Uchala can mean fathom, understand it, but uchala can also mean defeat it. Yaakov is told, right? Kisaritaim Elohim v'manashim vatuchal, and you were successful, victorious. You defeated them. So the statement, your thoughts are your knowledge is too wondrous for me, I can't fathom it, is different than your thoughts are impenetrable to me. They're so high, I can't fight them off. Again, ambiguity, perhaps as an expression of ambivalence. At least that's what I'm proposing. Okay? Now, in verse 7 to 12, you find this dramatic evocation of the idea that God's presence is inescapable, even more dramatically. Ana elech meruchecha, va'ana mipanecha evrach, right? Where shall I flee from where will I escape from your spirit? Where shall I flee from your presence? Now, again, to flee, evrach, sure sounds like at most it's ambivalent and might just be unambiguously less than positive. And then in verse 8, imesak shamayim shamata, if I ascend to the heavens, there you are. Va'atzia sheol, if I descend to Sheol, more literally, I think if I bed down in Sheol, like in the Hebrew, matzaim, sheets. If I bed down in Sheol hineka, there you are, right? You have the sense here, I think, of someone who's like, oh, if you forgive my perhaps not super respectful way of saying this, someone who experiences God as a kind of stalker, right? I'm trying to get away from you and you don't ever leave me alone. I have no room. You gotta give me some space here, right? So Sheol here, it's worth saying, in general, in Sheol, let me put it differently. In general, Sheol signifies being cut off from God. But here, in a kind of like hyperbole, perhaps, he's saying, even if I'm dead and lying down in Sheol, you'll see me there too. Meaning there's nowhere in the whole universe where I can go to be free of your relentless following me. This reminds me of, and I hope I don't offend anyone here in their love of children's books. You know, some of you may remember the book, The Runaway Bunny, which many people I know find to be an extremely moving book about a mother's sheer dedication to her child. And I remember reading that book to my oldest child once and thinking, this is the book about stalking. This is a book about a parent who will not let the kid take a breath. And this feels to me like The Runaway Bunny a little bit. Or at least that's what he's expressing, okay? Now, verse 9, if verse 8 gave us a kind of vertical axis, that is, if I went up to heaven, there you'd be. And if I went down to Sheol, there you'd be also. Now we have, if I went to the east, there you'd be. And if I went to the west, you'll also be there. Vertically and horizontally, there is nowhere for me to go, okay? Now, for whatever it's worth, I think this is plausible and maybe right. Robert Alter on this verse, I think, says something helpful, which is that the image here is somewhat mythological, more mythological than simply talking about going to the east and going to the west. Rather, what he imagines is that the speaker is taking wing with the dawn as it appears in the east, then soaring with the sun on its western path to the limits of the world, to the sands of the sea. In a funny way, you could even imagine this as not unrelated to an image in Psalm 19 of the sun making its way across the sky. Here, just for the Hebrew geeks, I will just mention here that we have here in the Masoretic text, Esah Chanfei Shachar. The Septuagint appears to have here Esah Chnafai Shachar. If I take my wings to the dawn, my wings, in other words, which would create a better parallel to the second part of the verse. Esah Knafai Shachar, Eshkenab Acharit Yam reads better Hebrew-wise than the Masoretic text in front of us, but that really doesn't really think matter all that much. Verse 10. Now, though the words can have a positive meaning, it's also possible that here they're not positive at all, because God is grabbing hold of the psalmist who is contemplating running away. If I say to you, I'm going to run away, but your hand is guiding me, your hand is guiding me all of a sudden sounds less unambiguously positive than if I say, I love you, and your hand is guiding me, right? So lahanchot here, the nacha of God's hand, I think is a little bit complex. I forget, I apologize if I put it in the source sheet, but Job 12:23 has a similar potentially negative meaning of nacha. Okay, let's go here to verse 11, okay? Human beings can hide from each other in darkness, but they cannot hide from God. Now, just very briefly, to say about verse 11, I don't know what it means, and neither does anybody else, to be totally blunt. Va'omar achoshech yishufeni v'layla or ba'adeni. JPS, if I say surely darkness will conceal me, night will provide me with cover, that sets me up for the next verse in which he says, Gam choshech lo yachshik mimeka, but darkness doesn't work. It doesn't darken for you. Some people think Yeshufeni means seize me. That is to say, yes, the darkness will seize me. Although I don't totally understand how the verse reads in that way. But again, the Yeshufeni is a little bit of a problem. And then again, in verse 12, but darkness is not dark for you. V'layla kayom ya'ir. Kachashecha ka'ora. Darkness and light, it's all the same for you. You see all of it. There's no way to hide from you. So what I suggested at the outset is that here we have the beginning here is quite negative. Or at least I want to propose that it is possible to read the beginning, these 12 verses, as somewhere between somewhat and quite negative. And then something shifts here. He turns his attention to the kind of wondrous process of gestation. God saw the psalmist even in the womb. You could see Jeremiah chapter 1, Job chapter 10. Seems to shift his mood, his perception, his experience of God watching him to an understanding of God being kind of permanently and perpetually invested in him and in his well-being. Now, I guess I should note that explicit discourse about God's creating the individual is actually quite rare in Tanakh. I can think of a handful of examples: Psalm 139, Jeremiah 1, Psalm 22, Psalm 71. It's not actually something that is expressed all that frequently. That's maybe a discussion for another day. I want you to know that all this time, the only person I could see on my whole screen was Rachel Edelman, and now you're gone too, Rachel. sorry to say. Okay. Now, so Psalm 13, Ki ata kanita chilyotai, because you created my, JPS renders conscience. That is a kind of interpretive, correct, but an interpretive, literally kidneys, but in the context of the mother's womb, it seems to be a reference to the inner organs that are understood to be where the conscience lies. We talk about God as bochen klayot, a God who examines the human kidneys. Something that I think if you're not if you don't by nature think about the history of ideas, it may not often cross your mind that some of the body parts that we associate with various aspects of human personality are deeply culturally conditioned, right? If you walked into a room with no access to the Bible of the ancient Near East, and you said, I feel, doctor, that my conscience is acting up because my kidneys are hurting, you might be looked at like you were a lunatic. But in the Bible, the kind of deeper organs than the heart often are where the conscience sits. Robert Alter very nicely, this is where Alter really shines in this kind of literary observation. Alter notes that the location in the womb has been triggered by the idea of being enveloped in darkness in verse 11 and 12, that the notion of darkness brings him all the way back, as it were, to the first darkness he knew, which is in his mother's womb. And then he says, Odecha, which is something we were not expecting until now, perhaps. I will praise you, al kinoraot nifleti. And JPS renders, for I am awesomely, wondrously made. It's worth noting here that nifleti, meaning wondrously made, might well need to be spelled with an aleph from the word pele that we've already seen. Robert Alter and some others notice here that the root is spelled with a hey, pet lamed, pe lamed hey, which would mean something more like I am wondrously set apart, which might mean something like you really knew me as an individual from the time I was a fetus, and I'm not just a generic human to you. I'm a person whose life and well-being you are invested in. If the intention here is pele, as in wonder, then I think there might be an interesting contrast here, as Carolyn Pressler notes, between pli'ad da'at mimeni in verse 6 and noraot nifleti and nifla'im ma'asecha here, right? What had earlier been experienced as potentially wonderful, but also seemingly difficult, hard to discern, now seems to be more unambiguously wondrous and wonderful. Now, one thing that I like here, and this may be an overreading, but I think it's interesting, noraot nifleti is an interesting phrase because the word noraot elsewhere, and you can look if you, Ruben, if you scroll down, I gave you a couple of examples here, Psalm 65, I think Psalm 106, where noraot refers to God's great and mighty deeds in history. I did give those, didn't I? I believe I did. Scroll down a little further. Yeah, from number 7 on. And here the idea might be, and this is quite a theology of the human person, that God's creation of the psalmist himself is a wonder in much the same way as God's other great deeds in history might be. Here you have this deeply personalized theology that what heals him, what comforts him, what makes him feel okay with God's presence is this kind of theological, spiritual realization of, you know, the very fact that you made me is a wonder and a source of praise. And you didn't just make me in some generic way. You worked your way in and through me. Not that anyone really cares, but now I'll say the only people I can see out of 138 people are Judith and Bill Cates. It's kind of amazing. Very strange. Okay, so verse 15, Lo nichad atzmi mimeka, right? My frame, my being, my physical reality was not hidden from you. Asher useti vaseter, when I was shaped in a hidden place. Rukamti betachtiot aretz, knit together in the recesses of the earth. I don't really know exactly what that means, other than to suggest that the womb and the recesses of the earth have some kind of psychic or Jungian connection to each other in his mind. And then verse 16, I will just say this is one, as I alluded to earlier, this verse is a total mess to make sense of. Golmi ra'u einecha, your eyes saw my unformed limbs. Okay, that's great. But now, va'al sifrecha kulam yikatevu, yamim yutzaru, velo echad bahem. Okay, I don't know what this means. I will also say, va'al sifrecha kulam yikatevu. I mean, potentially yamim, but I'm not really sure. And here I should say, nobody's really sure. Rashi thinks that what's being spoken of here is a book that kind of it lists every person who's ever going to be born, which God told Adam about. Ibn Ezra think it's some kind of book that's consulted when a person is formed. I don't know what it means. And then Yamim Yutzaru also, as I say, is obscure. JPS says, in due time they were formed. I guess that means the days were formed. Robert Alter says the days were fashioned. He thinks that might mean that the future of the child was already given shape in the womb. And then guess what? Velo echad bahem is also obscure. JPS to the very last one of them. Alter then tries, not one of them did lack. Did lack appears to be his insertion of the word yechsar. Velo echad mahem yechsar. This is a mess. I'll just give you a couple of examples of how this is read. JPS, your eyes saw my unformed limbs. They were all recorded in your book. In due time, they were formed to the very last one of them. There, it's not totally clear what the they is. Maybe my unformed limbs. You formed every one of my limbs. The NIV, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. There it appears to be days rather than limbs that were formed. NRSV, I think, has a similar meaning, as does Alter, if I understand what he's doing correctly. And then he says, V'li maya krure echael. Now, sorry, you know what, actually, let me just say one more thing, that before, there was a sense that there was no place or time taken control of, nurtured him through. Now, Maya Krure Echael, JPS says how weighty. The NIV, I think in some ways astutely, offers how precious. And Yakar can mean either weighty or precious. I think this might be a deliberate ambiguity. Beforehand, he was powerless. Okay, can someone chat me whether or not you can hear me? Because now I'm getting nothing at all, reception-wise.
We can hear you, Roshe.
You can hear now? Okay.
Yeah, we can.
Thank you. I don't know what's going on today. I apologize for these technical issues.
Yes, here.
You're coming in.
Can you hear me now?
We're losing every other sentence.
For how long has that been going on?
Oh, just for a few seconds every so often.
Okay, I'm gonna keep trying. Okay. So I suspect, you'll tell me if this is not working, I apologize. I suspect that what we have here is a deliberate ambiguity. God's weighty thoughts used to be too much for him. They made him feel powerless, but here now, God's weighty thoughts are precious to him, right? And that's the shift in mood that I suggested takes place here. Please do me a favor and keep me updated on whether you're hearing me. And Re'echa here is a kind of inclusio with verse 2. There, God knows his thoughts. Here, He is awed by God's thoughts. Are you all gone now? Seems to me you're all gone now.
No. We're here.
No, you're all here? Okay. All right. I'm
We
sorry.
we hear you
I'm trying
loud
to-
and clear. You're fine.
Yeah,
You're
Good
fine.
now.
Okay.
Good. We're with you.
Okay.
We're with you.
Okay, great. Okay, good. Verse 18. Esperei michol yerbun. They will be, if I counted them, they'd be more numerous than the sea. And then this very interesting textual ambiguity. Hekitzoti ve'odi imach. Hekitzoti, JPS renders I end, or you could say I come to an end. But the NIV and Robert Alter following it goes with I awake, which is what hekitzota usually means. Alan Daskin, you are now the only person I can see. Now, what it means to say I awake is not obvious here. Alter tries the following thing. He says that what the poet might be imagining is that after trying to understand and fathom God's infinite thoughts, he drifts off into exhaustion and then awakes to discover that God's presence is still with him. Okay, could be. What I think is maybe important here is the dramatic shift between verse 7, where can I flee, gives way to I awake and I am still with you. And here I want to just mention a very astute thing that John Goldingay articulates that I think is really beautiful, that instead of saying you are with me, which we would expect, he says, instead of hekitzoti ve'otcha imi, we have hekitzoti ve'odi imach. I wake up and I am with you. And that, Goldingay thinks, suggests his commitment to God rather than God's commitment to him. And that becomes the transition to what will come next. And what will come next, as I say, is jarring for a lot of readers and maybe a little bit hard to understand the connection between this and what has come before. But just to take a minute now and recap, what I'd suggested is that the ambiguity here is intended, and that, in fact, we've had this shift from experiencing God as this at least somewhat threatening force outside, a kind of divine stalker, to a kind of nurturing force inside, a kind of loving enabler. And that's the kind of the sort of spiritual and psychological shift that this psalmist experiences. Now, in verse 19, you have this very kind of dramatic shift, basically a request from God to slay the wicked and a demand that murderers, anshe damim, leave him alone. Now, what I suspect underlies this is something we see in other Psalms too. Psalm 104 is an example of this, is the idea that when a person comes to appreciate God's love and God's, I guess, protective providence, they are led to a feeling of frustration and even revulsion at sin and at sinners. That there's a way in which I want everybody to know this. And of course, this is dangerous ground because people, obviously, this is one of the places where religious energy can turn quite violent and even murderous. If you look at verse 20, Asher yomrucha limzima nasu lashav arecha. This is a bit of a mess, but let me say two things. Asher yomrucha limzima might mean one of two things. Either they invoke your name in the things they are doing that are horrible, or they speak of you horribly, right? In other words, is it that they invoke God in their evil doing? Let's call it pious evil people, or that they declare war on God. Given the meaning of nasa lashav in the Ten Commandments, it seems more likely to me that it means people who invoke God's name as part of the intrigue they engage in. And then nasu lashav arecha. First of all, some people amend arecha to adecha, which would read speak up against you. Nasu lashav adecha. But I'm a little skeptical given what nasa lashav means here. I gave you a source towards the bottom from 1 Samuel. In Aramaic, an ar is an enemy. And I assume this is a late Hebrew word. Nasu lashav arecha, your enemies swear falsely by you. Those who believe that they are your worshipers are in fact your enemies. And you could launch 1,000 sermons here on this point. People who invoke your name, people who might go to shul, people who might go to church, people who might shuckle very intensely, people who might, invoke Christ at every turn, but actually are invoking you and their piety in enabling them to do horrible things. Now, essentially what happens in the next 2 verses is that the psalmist announces his kind of solidarity, his unwavering commitment to God by declaring that he too hates God's enemies. There's so much we can say about this. And I guess I want to say only this, which is not going to make this easier for people. There are certain Christian Bible scholars, Jim Mays is an example of this, who have this tendency when they come upon texts like this to say in an almost apologetic mode, well, he's not talking about his own enemies, he's talking about God's enemies, which makes it better. The problem with this, of course, is that the slippage into imagining that your enemies are also God's enemies is a familiar one and a particularly dangerous one. There's that line I think I've mentioned before from Anne Lamott, who in one of her books, actually I think in a couple of her books, quotes her priest as saying to her, your spiritual life is in trouble when it turns out God hates all the same people you do. And I think the response to a comment like Jim Mays' comment is, yeah, but I don't know how much better that really makes this. This is still very dangerous ground that we are now walking on. Now, what happens next here is, I think, very interesting, which is in verse 23, what was before an indicative that made him uncomfortable. You search me out and it makes me crazy. Here becomes an imperative or a beseechment even. Chokrani el v'dalavi. Search me out, God. What an amazing shift in his mood and his relationship.
Hi, Rashai, you got paused again.
Translated, I think, as know my anxieties, know what makes me nervous, know what makes me uncomfortable. Now, I want to mention something that I think is beautiful midrashically, but unlikely to be pshat. I'm curious whether others agree with me. In a somewhat kind of classic essay about this, a Bible scholar named Gene Rice reads verses 23 and 24 as a self-critique of verses 21 and 22. That is, I said, oh God, I hate all the people you hate. I hate them with everything I have. And then he says, oh God, examine my heart. In other words, make sure that my hatred is about surrender to you and not my smug desire to feel superior to others. I am highly skeptical of this as pshat, but I think it's a gorgeous midrash, and there are, I think, a number of sermons to be launched at this point. If you're going to deride others as fakely religious, be careful that you're actually interested in what's true and not just in being superior to other people. Okay. Now, I guess, by the way, what Rice could say, I don't recall that he says this, but I don't remember it so vividly, which is that if sarapai really means anxieties, then that would support that reading, oh God, check me out, make sure that what's really animating me here is the right thing and not the wrong thing. Richard, what I just happened, it happened to pop up. I don't know why. I haven't opened the comments yet about why it couldn't be pshat. I'm not saying it couldn't be pshat. I'm saying it's unlikely to be pshat, because it seems to me that these verses are fundamentally positive. It doesn't seem to me that he thinks God is going to examine him and problem. It seems like it's yet another declaration of unflagging loyalty. Not, I admit that if sar apai really means anxiety here, then as I say, maybe you can argue that it's pshat, but verse 24 surely doesn't read that way. Ure'eim derech otzev bi seems to be, don't find that. Perhaps I'm wrong, but that would be my gut here. Now let's just sort of say one thing about derech otzev bi. JPS translates here correctly, I think, from the way it's written, if I have vexatious ways, from the word like atzuv in modern Hebrew. Some scholars take derech otzev as if it said derech etzev, see if there is idolatry in me. Now, of course, that may be a pun that's intended, because otzev in the presence of God leads to etzev in God, right? The worshiping of idol, as it were, breaks God's heart. And then finally, unecheni b'derech olam, if I was right in verse 10, when I said that gam sham yadcha tancheni implied that nacha can be negative or positive, here necheni becomes unambiguously positive. And that's a kind of yet another encapsulation, if you will, of what I've tried to suggest is what's really going on in this text as a whole. Now, I have less time than usual to scroll for comments, but let me see if I find any. Nobody seemed to write questions here today. Oh, here's a couple. So I'm sorry, this was not a comment, but Joan Saperstein says, oh, I lost it now. Joan says, you have created my mind for a klayot. I think that's unlikely. I don't. Richard, you can tell me if you agree with that or not. Once again, I'm having a lot of difficulty having this thing not scroll away from me. When I say relation, Betsy asked, am I thinking of process theology, that God is not omniscient but relational? Well, first of all, let me just say, not to be pedantic, I'm not interested in what I'm thinking here. I'm really just trying to mine the pshat of this text. I do not think this text has a process theology approach. I think the idea here is that the God who is capable of knowing all and is capable of doing all is a God who's deeply invested in relationship. In the Bible, to the extent that God does not exercise omnipotence, for example, or to the extent that God does not exercise all the power that God has, that's a more powerful, I think, accurate way of saying it. That is a relational choice on God's part or a mystery. It is not that God lacks the power. A partially omnipotent God is not a one that I think that the Bible, I'm saying that in a way that's not careful enough. A God whose omnipotence is limited in the way that process theology's God's power is, omnipotence is limited. Try this one more time. The limits on divine omnipotence and divine power in the Bible are different than the limits of divine omnipotence and power in process theology. Jane asks, where I see the impression, what you perceive as oppressive, I see as an extraordinary closeness, not typical of how we as Jews think of God. Consider someone intensely lonely. So Jane, I'm glad that you have that reading. As I suggested, that is a possible reading, but as I hope I made clear as the shiur went on, quite a number of the Hebrew verbs in this text, I think, are ambiguous, and therefore, I would argue ought to be read as ambivalent. I think one of the things that makes ambiguous texts so delightful is that they can be heard different ways by different people. But it does seem to me like this psalmist wants to do something different than just meditate on God's closeness. He wants, or so, let me put it differently. He wants to do something different than just meditate on the sheer joy of God's closeness. He wants to meditate on the complexity of God's closeness and how God's closeness can also at times be oppressive. I think he ends up in a fairly positive place. Okay, let's see if I have any more, since I'm running out of time. There's a bunch of comments. Ruben, if you know how to save these comments for me, please do. Eliza says, how does our reading shift if we see God as totally within? So the inescapability is also the inescapability of oneself. So there I would say you can try to offer a reading like that, but I don't think it's biblical. That is to say, midrashically, from a certain kind of immanentist theology, you can try to hear the psalm that way. But I think the whole point of this psalm, in a way, the whole, that's a strong statement, but the part of the theological point of this psalm is that the creator God who created all is also active deep within. It is about a radical commitment both to transcendence and to immanence, not a theology that's purely immanent. Okay, I'm really out of time. Let me just say, let me just do one more, and we only got to 329 when Abraham asked, what is God doing vis-a-vis the psalmist besides just being there? Yeah, well, I think it depends which part. One thing God is always doing is watching and searching, which I think is experienced as very active, right? It's not just God is there, it's that God is, as it were, opening me up and getting to know me better than I know myself. And I think, when you think about psychologically the ways that even, after 40 years of therapy, there are ways in which we remain opaque to ourselves. There's a way in which is a very, I think, profound power to that. And I guess I will only just add there that God is also, God is not doing that now, but God is also has been involved in giving shape and giving life to him. And so there's a kind of active hand of providence and creation. I find it a very odd view to think with no basis that Psalm 23 is not original to the book of Psalms. That just seems to me, unless there's a real argument there, Betsy, to basically be saying, I have a vision form to it, then I will kind of push it out. I just don't see how Rabbi Gilman could make a case like that. I'm open to hearing it, but it seems very unlikely to me. That's not an argument you make based on theme. I think it's an argument you have to make based on something else. Okay, sorry, one last thing here. Robert Alter, if Hedgen is translated as shaped as Alter does that make the beginning of the psalm less oppressive to you? Again, I want to react again, and this is going to be my last word here. I'm not suggesting that there isn't also a positiveness here. Alter might be right. I don't think that his translation captures enough of the ambiguity of what sarar means here. And I'm not sure his rendering quite gets at the full richness and complexity of this text. I actually would just say, to the extent that one resists or is uncomfortable with or doesn't like the reading whereby this text is open to the two very different dimensions of how we can experience God's searchingness, one could argue that this psalm ends up in a far more robustly moving religious place than just an unambiguous 25 verse, declaration of God, you're with me and you love me and you make me feel, held in a world that otherwise would terrify me. As powerful as that might be, here, I think there's just something enormously moving about acknowledging that, many of us have been in relationships that are the best relationships in our lives, and there are days when they feel totally unbearable and in our face. And there's something, I think, enormously spiritually moving about making space for that too in one's relationship with God and in the reading of the Psalms. Again, I'm I'm not selling that. I just think that that is more likely to be the shot of what is going on here. I think the flow makes more sense. I think the ways that several of the verbs reappear in more unambiguously positive ways later makes for a richer reading, and I would propose a more accurate reading of this text. Okay, thank you all very much. I'll end, as I always do, by sharing really warm wishes for the health and safety of you and all of those dear to you, and healing for those who